It's Query and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
It's rebounded by Halliburton. Pacers on the go, into the far corner, and Neesmith right in front of his own bench. A catch-and-shoot three. Halliburton drives it to the right side. The Knicks go to sleep, and Halliburton hits a three. They just dropped off of him as though he had never taken a three in his life. Halliburton left hand, penetrates the arc. He's in the lane. He's at the dotted half, and he scooped it off the glass. 28 seconds left in the half. Right side, nobody on Neesmith, but he missed the three from the right edge. Halliburton with a rebound, bouncing it inside, and Bradley lays it in. Brunson has it, moving at center of the floor. He threw it away. Halliburton knocked it down. Neesmith picked it up. Halliburton to the trailing Siakam, roaring down the middle with a right-hand slam. 8 seconds to shoot. Near corner McConnell, back to top and right edge, on top to Halliburton. Here comes a long three. Halliburton for Indiana, left to right in yellow, down the right side, gliding through the air and laying it in. Halliburton will make the inbound. Towns will challenge. And Halliburton got it in. Top in for three! Top in for three.
Yeah! Yeah! Boom, baby! Boom, baby! Boom, baby!
And that city that is not sleeping is Indianapolis, Indiana, as I guess it was New York that was sleeping, right? Because the Pacers now have a 3-1 advantage in the Eastern Conference Finals. They are 1 win away. No Little Town Blues here, Little Town celebration, but still 1 win left to go in what was the ultimate. And when I say this, you're going to wonder what I mean by this. The ultimate team victory last night, despite the fact that it came on the shoulders of Tyrese Halliburton in a magnificent, prolific triple-double performance that puts the Pacers now on the cusp, the doorstep of their second NBA Finals since joining the association from the ABA. Good afternoon to you. My name is Jay Query. Eddie Garrison, who put that together and is the Pacers, of course, radio broadcast producer, joining you here today on Query and Company. And last night at the Fieldhouse was pretty magical, no question about it. It's what I think everybody wanted so badly to experience on the night of the race, but then everybody went home, rested, got ready again, and came back, and it was loud, it was raucous, it was nonstop, it was star-studded, and the biggest star was Tyrese Halliburton. And there are a number of things that took place last night that I took away from that game that I want to go over today. The first being this. I know a lot of people don't realize this, but did you know that the Pacers are named as such, not just because of the racing heritage from an automobile standpoint in Indiana, but almost more so because of the horse racing history in the state of Indiana, and the Pacer being horse racing that has obviously the individual riding on the cart behind it. And that, I guess, misnomer of, because people just assume Pacers because of the race, which is a part of it. But the Pacers last night were named appropriately as such because of the pace in which they played. And we didn't see that necessarily in Game 3, certainly in the second half of Game 3. We saw it last night. Tyrese Halliburton is at his best when he's an unwind toy, right? Rip the string and let him go. And he was at his best last night in setting the pace for Indiana. And one of the things that the Pacers do, as there are a couple of things here that I want to go over on why this was the ultimate team win, okay? The first being, I'm going to go back to what I've said for a while, and when people hear me say this, they're going to think this guy is the biggest idiot on the planet, as if you don't already think that of me. A real catalyst for what Indiana does and the pace with which they play is Miles Turner. Now, Miles Turner's been a popular whooping boy in town. I get it. People love and they love him, but at the same time they get frustrated by him because he'll have 21 night and then 7 points the next, whatever. Believe me when I tell you this: every point that Miles Turner gets, every 3-pointer that he hits, those are gravy. Those are bonus. Sure, they're an integral part of what Indiana wants to do, but for the most part, it's not at its core what he is designed to do. This Pacers team wants to play fast, right? And the way that they play fast is Turner, who does not get credited with as many rebounds as for which he is responsible, because he is remarkable at doing two things. Number one, either getting a defensive rebound, or number two, tying up and tussling with, whether it be Robinson or Towns, a big for New York that keeps the possibility of a defensive rebound alive for Indiana. Not only that then, but he's able to seal off said defender. And now, when he's able to break away at a better pace than a Towns, now you're going 5-on-4. But more so importantly than that, what the Pacers do incredibly well, and Halliburton is a big part of this. Halliburton gets a rebound. I watched it last night. When Halliburton is at his best, he gets the ball on a break, and the first thing he's looking to do is make a transitional pass that's not a short one to a Nembhard or like a Siakam, but rather down floor behind the defense. And then you get 3 other Pacers coming down trailing that are outrunning the fatigued Knicks, and now you've got like a 3-on-1 or a 4-on-1 opportunity, literally. And that is so largely facilitated by what it is that Halliburton's able to do. The other thing that he did last night that he's able to do masterfully is determine, once he comes back out and he dances around a little bit, then determining when he is going to make the drive and penetrate to the glass and score. And he did that remarkably well last night. But let me give you a few examples on why this was a fantastic team win, okay? About midway through the second quarter, Ben Shepherd's in the game. Aaron Nesmith, who came out, the ankle obviously was not an issue. He looked spectacular early. He hit 2 big threes. He had a dunk. Nesmith was playing really well. They brought Nesmith out, and Rick Carlisle subs in Shepherd. Nesmith comes to the sidelines, and he gives almost a grin to Rick Carlisle, like, man, coach, please, I wish you would have left me in there. But he comes to the sidelines, and when he comes to the sidelines, he goes to the bench, and then very shortly after, he jumps up, does Aaron Nesmith, and is literally, once he jumps up, he is literally screaming to something on the sideline, on the floor. There's a stop in action, and he's yelling to Ben Shepherd, and he calls Ben Shepherd over. And he's instructing to Ben Shepherd, look, on that rotation, on that ball rotation, here's where you need to be. And he's telling him what to do. And he's coaching him from the sidelines. And Shepherd's listening to it. And I can't remember if it was within that quarter or shortly thereafter, but Shepherd got an open look and knocked it down on a rotation of opening, presumably where it was Nesmith that was telling him where he needed to be. The fact that Aaron Nesmith is willing to jump up off the bench and coach from the sidelines because of something he noticed, and presumably when he was coming out, Aaron Nesmith, he was disappointed because there was something that he saw that he thought he could take advantage of. So instead of waiting his turn, he points it out to Ben Shepherd and says, look, if you're going to be me now, here's what you need to do. And Shepherd follows it. That's teamwork. That's leadership. You don't see that with every team in the NBA. You don't. I watch it. I watch other teams. I watch body language, all of that. Doesn't make me an expert, but I see it. I look for those things. Additionally, Pascal Siakam. Eddie, you mentioned it before we went on the air. Was that the quietest 30 points you've ever seen out of a guy in the NBA?
Part of it's because he had 11 in the first quarter, and Tyrese was so effective that you forgot that Siakam had a great first quarter, and then he closed the game out when they needed it to.
I mean, what Siakam does so well, of course, is his ability to back down, say, a Towns or a Robinson, either one, to try to get them into a reach position for a foul, and then if it's not there or if they completely seal off the block, his ability to then turn and fade away and score is elite. I mean, he does it. That's why he is an all-NBA level player. And he did it last night, at tremendous precision. And then, of course, shooting from the outside, he was very, very good. Now, I'm going to read to you, and I'm reading it off of my phone here, so bear with me. I'm going to read to you last night what Tyrese Halliburton had to say in the post-game press conference, okay? I'm reading this actually from Dan Devine. I'll just read you exactly as Dan said it. In the course of an 11-minute podium session with reporters, an interview that spanned nearly 2,000 words, the primary topic of which was playing the game of his life to get his team within one win of a chance to play for an NBA championship, Tyrese Halliburton used the word "we" 28 times, the word "our" 5 times, the phrase "as a group" 6 times, and the phrase "play the right way" 5 times. He said, "It's about winning" twice. "I just want to impact winning" once, and "how can I impact winning" once, bringing to 4 discrete instances of emphasizing how much he wants to win. He gave a 52-second, 189-word answer in praise of Benedict Mathurin, who bounced back from a rough start to the series by exploding for 20 points in 13 minutes off the bench, helping Indiana expand its lead with his physical drives to the basket and the free throws they generated. He almost said that it was more exciting to see Triple H in Gainbridge Fieldhouse than it was to see his dad back in the building, but he stopped just short. Chalk up another possession successfully concluded without an unforced error, end quote. That writing from Dan Devine, which is brilliant. Tyrese Halliburton yesterday, that was his perhaps finest performance. Certainly in a clutch moment, in a clutch game, it was his finest performance. Benedict Mathurin, who was becoming much maligned. I said yesterday, numerous occasions, that I wanted to see if Jarris Walker would crack the rotation. And that I was concerned that Mathurin, that I thought if Nesmith couldn't go, it would be Shepard and Mathurin that would carry that load, and that we would see how that worked out. Obviously, in the case of Nesmith, he was able to go. Then Shepard comes in, gives them quality minutes, and then Mathurin comes in. Benedict Mathurin last night, I believe this is correct. I believe last night Benedict Mathurin got to 20 points faster than any reserve in an NBA playoff game. 13 minutes it took him to score 20 points last night. And there's a difference between scoring 20 points just to score and scoring 20 points where it's within the flow of what's asked. And last night, Benedict Mathurin got those points within the flow of what's asked, right? I thought Mathurin was literally, there is no player. Eddie, can you name a player last night on the Pacers roster that got minutes that you would say underperformed of what you would expect or hope from those minutes?
Nope.
You know one thing that's happened in this series that we have not talked about?
The shift from Thomas Bryant to Tony Bradley?
Bingo. And I would assume that's because Bryant can shoot. I felt like there were times in the Cleveland series where Bryant's emotions kind of rode the razor's edge, where you wondered if it was almost not detrimental, but he is such an emotional player that at times he loses focus of what it is that he needs to do. And Bradley is not somebody, look, Bradley's minutes that he's giving you are not those that you go, wow, this guy's, but he's not doing anything that jumps out at you. But he's also, A, not erring. B, he is a pretty solid defender, and he keeps balls alive. And if things rotate over to him, he has a presence about him where he knows what to do. but he is. I think it's low post presence defensively that is the difference with him of why he's getting it over Thomas Bryant. And just lower core strength, basically, but you don't need him to step outside and shoot threes.
With him being able to match the size and physicality of Mitchell Robinson. And, I wondered, too, Jake, I saw this earlier in the series. If you recall, Thomas Bryant got hurt in Game 1 or Game 2, hurt his hand/wrist. And in the first quarter, or in the first half, I should say, and then he never came back. So I wonder if that played a part of it, or if the fact they were just trying to get a different look with Tony Bradley, and they've liked what they've gotten from him.
Yeah, I just think that he provides a more, I'm going to say this for lack of a better phrase, a more planted and rooted, strong defense on the block. He's not Bryant is just a different. It's not a knock on Thomas Bryant. Thomas Bryant's style of play and his strength as a player is not what you necessarily need against New York, because you need defensively. Bryant's strength, I think, is the fact that he is a center on the offensive end that's fluid and can step out and hit shots. And against New York, you need at least, two guys on the low block that are kind of planted there and sealing things off. One of the things that the Pacers do really well is when they go in the opposite direction. The number of times that I saw the Pacers last night, they would get a defensive rebound or an inbound or whatever, and you could literally see people standing up. I was one of them, standing up, doing the rotation in their hand, okay, let's go, move, let's go. And what they do in doing that is they then seal off three of the Knick defenders, where those defenders, because you're running so fast past them that they can't get into the play in time. And you go down there and then you have immediately, you try to get the quick basket on a transition, and if that doesn't work, then you set up your offense. That's the one area, I guess, where Bryant would be more beneficial than Bradley. But the defensive need down low, just to be able to facilitate for that to go into rebound, is why Bradley's in there over Bryant. Here's one other thing I noticed last night, and then we'll get to the kind of the layout of the show here for today. Karl Anthony Towns is an elite level player. But I noticed in the last 2 minutes of game number 3 that he was favoring his knee. And the guy that sits next to me at the games, J.D. Spahn, made a really good point last night. We're sitting there and J.D. said, the way that Towns moves, it's almost like he hyperextends his knee with every step. And I'm like, man, you're not kidding. So it's hard to tell sometimes if he's favoring his knee because he has an odd step or balance, if you will, okay? And having said all of that, I don't know if it showed on television, Eddie, and I know that you're in here doing the radio, but you're listening, you can see the game as well. Karl Anthony Towns at the end of that game last night for the last 5 minutes looked completely like he was on, number one, he was on fumes, but number two, he was favoring 3 different parts of his body. He looked completely broken down.
Well, him and Neesmith banged knees on one play, and it was on that left knee that he had been favoring. He literally started grabbing it in the first 30 seconds of the game. I was like, oh, boy.
And he by the end of the game, he could barely get across the floor. Now, he's a remarkable player.
Yeah.
But they ask him to be in so many different areas. He gets the ball on the high post and puts it on the floor, and he's looking to penetrate. And I thought Toppin did a really good job on him. I thought Siakam did a very good job on him. Siakam is physical on him from 15 feet out. And then if he goes beyond that and he fires up a 3, you kind of take your chances with that, right? Even though he's an outstanding shooter. And Brunson, the thing that makes Brunson so difficult is the fact that he is able to play very well through contact, and then he's, gets to the line. How many free throws did Brunson have last night?
A lot.
I'm going to guess. I'm going to pull up the box score. I'm going to guess he took.
He had, I know the exact number.
I'm going to guess he had 14.
You're close.
16.
You're on the high side.
12.
Yep.
Were they all in the third quarter? Because it felt that way.
Most of them.
It definitely felt that way. So, here's the bottom line. One win left, and this one's going to be, what do I always say? The knockout blow is the hardest to land, right? The knockout punch is the hardest to get. Does that happen in New York? It would only, I'm praying. I mean, we're all praying that they win in New York, right? And close it out.
Between last year and this year, Jake, they are 5-1 in closeout games. The only loss was against the Milwaukee Bucks.
They also, by the way, have won what? They won 6 straight road playoff games this year?
Yes.
Selfishly speaking, because as we know, the world revolves around me, right?
There's a reason why your email address is @me, right?
Correct. My 2 favorite people, Jake Query and me,
Yeah.
right? JakeQuery@me.com.
Yep.
Selfishly speaking, we need the Pacers. When I say we, I mean the whole city. We need the Pacers to close this out in 5. You know why?
Why is that?
Because tomorrow night I have to take Shannon to the airport. She's going out of town.
It's just finally getting rid of you?
That's right. And I have to go to Detroit for the IndyCar race.
That's right.
So we're not going to be here on Saturday.
Oh, can I have Shannon seats?
I believe
Just
her
kidding.
family's using them. Yes, you can. I have no control over that, right? They're
I
her
know.
seats, not mine.
I know.
But I believe her nephew's going.
You know what?
But
You should just say JMV wants them. And then give them to me.
That's right. Nonetheless, we will not be there on Saturday. So, listen. But if they don't get it done in Game 5, then by all means, of course, I want everybody there to be raucous, be loud, and be awesome Saturday night. Awesome on Saturday night. Dustin Dopirak is going to join us on the show 1 o'clock today. Austin Crozier, 2 o'clock. And we'll break down. I thought last night it was super cool. Some of the former Pacers that were in the house. You had Jermaine O'Neal was there. Danny Granger was there, who has not been back a lot. Darren Collison was there. George Hill was there. Al Harrington was there. Dale Davis was there. Antonio Davis was there. Rick Smits was there. Jelly Roll was there. Now, Jelly Roll I'm curious about because Ben Stiller was there. The Bob Dylan fellow was there.
Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah. Spike Lee was there. Okay? They're all rooting for New York. I get it. And Ben Stiller, in his defense or to his credit, he was just chill and cheered for his team and didn't give anybody any grief. Now, there were 2 guys behind me that were chirping up a blue streak, and T.J. McConnell had some words with them. And I heard T.J. McConnell tell them they were losers. He was kind of joking around. He did the L on the forehead thing. and these guys then, that ramped up their level of, being verbose, if that's a word, to the point where security came over, and then T.J. McConnell came over and said, look, these guys are fine. They don't need to be removed, but just tell them to watch their mouth. I think it was the fact that they were getting profane that bothered McConnell because people could hear them and they were really loud. But Ben Stiller was not one of those. But Jelly Roll looked like – now, do we know what he was doing here? I looked it up to see if maybe there was a concert.
Nope.
He was cheering, I think, for the Pacers, right? Lance Stevenson was there last night as well.
Born ready, that's right.
But Jelly Roll, is he a Pacer fan?
Johnny Cougar was in the house last night, too.
He was there. I hate saying this. I hope he's not listening. That's the first time that I've noticed. And I get it. He's – how old is Mellencamp? Can you look it up? I'm going to guess that Mellencamp is – if Jack and Diane came out 42 years ago, and he had to have been 29 at that time, I'm going to say he's 72 years old.
You're very, very close. Very close.
Price is Right rules. Am I still in the running?
Yes.
74.
You're not in the running anymore.
73.
Yep. Turned 74 in October.
That is the first time with Mellencamp that I saw him, and I thought to myself, whoa, he looks old. I get it, right? He doesn't look old for 75. Don't get me wrong, not that 75 is old, but you know what I'm saying? But, it's frozen in time where you think of him as being 45, and he's not. He's 70, 73, whatever he is. But Jelly Roll was rooting for the Pacers, and I want to know if he's, what's going on there, right? Which is cool. Are you a Jelly Roll fan, Eddie?
Oh, well, I mean, I know some of his songs. I can't say that I routinely listen to
But he's pretty
Jelly
big
Roll.
time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's like a marquee performer.
My only friend went out to Las Vegas to go see Morgan Wallen, and Jelly Roll opened for Morgan Wallen.
Well, Jelly Roll's now performing with, gosh darn it, I just spaced on it. Who's he performing with right now? He's on tour with somebody.
I don't know.
In that same ilk. Look it up. Look it up. Jelly Roll right now on tour. Oh, somebody help me out here. Because I looked it up.
He does perform in Nashville in 2 days.
Well, he's somewhere tonight, right? He has a show tonight in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Because I looked it up. Here's why I mention it.
Lainey Wilson.
What's that?
Lainey Wilson?
No. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong dates. I thought when
Post Malone?
Thank you.
You're welcome. He does perform tonight in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I thought perhaps he was performing here, and that's why he was here for the game. And then I saw, no, he is in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And I mean, I just thought, okay. So can somebody let me know if he has, like, background with the Pacers? Because he was totally cool there as a Pacer fan, apparently, or acting as if he was a Pacer fan. Dustin Dupera going to join us 1 o'clock today. Austin Crozier, 2 o'clock. Probably your calls as well. A win away. It's a celebratory. What is today, Wednesday?
Yes.
Celebratory Wednesday here. Pacers over the Knicks. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. You know, the music's good. Does anybody really, like, if you're at a dessert place, or if you're in a bakery, you're at a breakfast, does anybody really eat jelly rolls? I think
so.
A jelly roll is basically is that not like a donut with a gelatinous center? Is that a jelly roll?
You like to use that word, don't you? Gelatinous?
Do I? Do I use it a lot?
I've heard you use it a few times over the
I've
last
described
week.
you a few times that way, right?
Really?
Have I not? Yes.
Wow. Okay.
The insulated gelatinous
you
Eddie?
can find a new producer now.
What?
Jelly rolls are light, versatile sponge cakes filled with sweet jelly or jam, making them a classic dessert enjoyed year-round.
So basically a Twinkie with jam in the middle, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Benedict Mathurin.
I would probably put them more, I think, like the ho-hos.
Do you like the ho-hos?
I haven't had a ho-ho in who knows how long.
You know what's, I think, overrated? Ding-dongs. I don't like ding-dongs.
Really?
Yeah, too dry. Right? Now, the Hostess cupcakes, I'm all about it. Snowballs, all about the snowballs.
Ugh, gross.
Snowballs are the best.
They are disgusting.
No, snowballs are the best.
They're disgusting.
Ho-hos also. Ho-hos have the same exterior chocolate stuff as the, what's the one I just said? I can't believe I just spaced on the word.
Ding-dong?
Ding-dongs. They have the same, and it's, I don't know, it dries it out.
Snowballs are gross.
But the Hostess cupcakes, excellent. You know why? Because now, gelatinous is a word that you say I use too much. There's a word that women hate that would be the perfect description of the Hostess cupcake.
Moist?
Eddie, come on now.
Moisture?
You know that every female in your life, that's their least favorite word, right?
No.
See,
False. It's not my mother's least favorite word. It's not my sister's least favorite word. It's not my significant other's least favorite word.
Other than, of non-profane words, that is their least favorite word. I guarantee it.
Nope.
Guarantee it.
Nope.
Okay. I think somebody needs to get to know the women in their life better.
I think I know the women in my life pretty well.
Okay. Benedict Mathurin and the way that he played last night. Just as he was coming into the game, I was having a conversation with somebody and said, look, it is nothing against Benedict Mathurin at all. But yes, sir?
Someone in the chat just said, gelatinous center sounds like Jake's midsection.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm 52 years old. I will readily admit that. Although I think for 52, not doing too bad. But the Mathurin, when he came into the game, I said to somebody, I'm like, I just am beginning to wonder more and more if we have not now conclusively seen that while he is a very good player, he is a square peg in the round hole. It just seemed like he was the one player that doesn't fit with what Indiana wants to do. And by that, I mean Indiana in terms of the Pacers and the way the offense that they run, and he is more of like an isolation, back down type scorer, and it seems to kind of slow things down a little bit. Last night, though, ironically enough, and to prove everybody wrong, he comes out and it's not slow down at all. He scores 20 points in the shortest amount of time in NBA playoff history. 13 and a half minutes. Tony East had that stat last night. And that's exactly what the Pacers needed. Because what the Pacers need is they need auxiliary scoring, but they need it fast-paced. And Mathurin did exactly that. And just at a time when you were starting to wonder whether or not Benedict Mathurin was going to be in the long-term game plan for the Pacers. And I don't mean, look, they're a game away from the NBA Finals. It is absurd and irrational and irresponsible to sit here and start taking calls about what trades they need to make. I'm not saying that. But what we know is the fact that the Pacers are going to have to get a little bit creative with their money because they're going to re-sign Miles Turner, and I do believe they're going to re-sign Miles Turner. They're probably going to have to pay the luxury tax, but they also know that the time is right now, and trades sometimes are very uncomfortable. Trades sometimes are hard to see the forest through the trees. Trades sometimes can hurt some feelings or make you apprehensive, and sometimes they don't pay off. But having said all of that, look at the two teams that presumably, and I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse. I'm not, but if you look at the two teams that most likely are going to be the matchup in the finals, what do both of them have in common in terms of their construction? The Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers, what do they both have in common in terms of the way they were built? Both of them were built largely upon the decision to part ways with a marquee all-NBA level player at a time when they didn't have one of those. And when they dealt Paul George, yes, Paul George forced the Pacers' hand. But when they dealt Paul George away and got back what they could in Victor Oladipo and Domas Sabonis, and then obviously flipped Sabonis into Tyrese Halliburton, Oklahoma City obviously had Paul George. And at a time when they could use like an all-NBA performer like that, they flipped Paul George into essentially Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and like 25 draft picks, right?
Now, here's the thing, Jake. If one of the two teams of Oklahoma City or Indiana wins the NBA final, do they send a ring to Paul George?
For real, right? I mean, because he is a major part of, but my point being, at the time when either of those trades were made, any of those trades were made, I'm sure there were people on both fan bases that were like, I don't know about that. Like, do we really want to go there? Do we really need to do that move? This is a marquee level player. Now, in Indiana's case, like I said, hand was forced a little bit. But Mathurin, when you look at it, I think there was a lot of thought of, okay, if there is one player on this team that you've got to distribute away in order to get cap flexibility and to open up opportunity for young players, continue to develop a Jarris Walker, have Ben Shepherd on the floor, etc. Mathurin's that one guy. And then last night he comes out and does that, and you say, but then again, maybe we just need to temper the expectation of Ben Mathurin. Because Ben Mathurin, to a great extent, I think, is victim to something that's one of the most common thoughts in sports. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody. And last night, there might have been a transformation of that thought. And I'll tell you what it was that he might be guilty of and why we need to redirect that when we come back. Dustin Dopirak in 20, Austin Crosher, 2 o'clock here on a Wednesday. I call it the Alex Smith rule. I've mentioned it on the radio more times than I probably should have or would like to admit. Okay? But Alex Smith was a darn good NFL quarterback. Really good. And spent, like when he was in, where did he have his best years? Kansas City and Washington? Right?
Oh, yeah.
Really good, solid player. But because he was the number 1 overall pick in San Francisco, he was deemed a bust in his early years because he didn't immediately become a franchise quarterback. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And with that said, I feel like Benedict Mathurin, because of the fact of where he was selected, there was so much expectation because it had been since George McLeod when the Pacers, another example of the Alex Smith phenomenon, by the way. George McLeod was drafted by the Pacers, I believe, 6th in 1989. And they thought he was going to be basically a Magic Johnson-style bigger point guard. Did George McLeod, when he came here, personal tragedy within his family, not once but twice. I believe both of his parents passed within months of him being drafted. And he just never found his footing here in Indiana and was deemed a bust. Then he goes to Dallas and becomes one of the best three-point shooters in the game. Really good player for Dallas, not a good player for Indiana. For Dallas, it was like, man, this guy's great because of how you acquired him. You made a trade for him or signed him as a free agent or whatever it was. I don't remember how they acquired him. Same thing with Alex Smith in San Francisco, a bust because he was the top pick. But then elsewhere, you look at him and you go, solid player. I think with Ben Mathurin, because of the fact that the Pacers had not had a single-digit inside the top 10 pick in the draft, and they drafted him, there was so much thought of, okay, whoever they draft here is going to be their franchise. That's going to be their cornerstone piece. And Mathurin certainly, early in his time here, showed glimpses of that because he was a Bulldog scorer at a time when everyone knew they were rebuilding, and the thought process was that they would be rebuilding around Benedict Mathurin. Now, I think if we temper those expectations and simply say, this is very clearly Tyrese Halliburton's team. And it is very clearly the veteran leadership of Pascal Siakam that complements that, and that's your Batman and Robin. And then you need auxiliary pieces that are there to complement that. And if Benedict Mathurin is okay with being that guy, then you're good with that, right? So if Mathurin can be that kind of complementary piece, he's a darn good one. He would be the perfect and can be the perfect for them, Eddie, off-bench scorer if he's able to do. And I realized last night 20 points in 13 minutes is a bit of an anomaly. But he needed the sands of the hourglass were starting to run through where you wondered if they just never were able to find a permanent role for him. Last night, what he did is perfect for what they need. Not just in this equation against New York, but just in general, right? Perfect for what they need.
They don't win that game without Benedict Mathurin last night. I thought he was really, really good in that second quarter for them, scoring when they needed him to score, and he was able to get to the line late in the second half, and I thought his defense was really good. He made a nice pass to Pascal Siakam in transition that allowed Siakam to go score. I thought that was one of the best games we've seen from Benedict Mathurin in the postseason.
No question. And it was kind of, Eddie, I think one of the things that made the Mathurin outburst last night so important, and you feel free to disagree with me, to me it feels kind of like the Siakam, okay? Siakam, as you mentioned, had a quiet 30. And to me, Mathurin's 20 was, I'm not going to say quiet, but it wasn't forced. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It wasn't forced. It was within the flow of what they need from him. And I thought it was critically important last night. There is not – I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. There was not a single player for the Indiana Pacers last night that underperformed. Not a single one, right? I mean, every single player that got on the floor did essentially exactly what you want them to do. Every one of them. There's not anybody that last night – typically in a game you say – that guy had an off night, or, man, if they could have gotten this out of that guy. And I don't think a single one last night did it. 239-1070, the telephone number. Jeff joins us. What's up, Jeff?
Hey, I don't mean this in a bad way. Mather has got a little bit, very little bit, of Ron Artest. And I thought when all that went down, where he took a jab at the guy in the chest, I thought he almost kind of lost his edginess.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
It looked like he was playing scared, and I thought last night was the first time he wasn't playing scared. I think he's one of those players, he's got to have his edge about him, and I think he then is a bigger factor. And I hate to see him lose the edginess, but I also think he didn't want to get too wrapped up into the problem that Artest kind of took it too far. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair. In other words, he's a guy that, Jeff, I think kind of needs to ride that razor's edge, and he went over it against Cleveland. And I think it took him a while to get back from it. I think it's psychologically he lost his focus a little bit, and it took him away from what he wanted to do, and he just – I'm not going to say he was apprehensive, but it was like he didn't really know what his role was, and then last night it all came back to him. And now they need that. He could be their X factor for certain. There were times I thought it'd be Walker. Maybe it is actually Mathurin. But I thought, yes, when he got flattened by DeAndre Hunter, it did seem to kind of set him back a little bit. And maybe this is now what gets him back on track. Evan, 239-1070. Evan, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. What's going on?
Good. First, I agree with you. My wife's least favorite word on God's green earth is the word moist.
Yes,
so
every female you've ever met. Correct, Evan? That is correct. Every female you've ever met, except for the one big profane one. But yes, that yes. Of normal lexicon, that is the least favorite. That is correct.
Yes. I've never heard anybody else say that, but you're 100% right. That is my wife's least favorite word ever.
Right. See, Evan, you're a guy that knows the women in your life. See?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I appreciate that comment.
Fair.
But I wouldn't go that far. But last night at the Pacer game, I was watching it while I was working, and it was extremely exciting. I think the part that I enjoyed the most was every time it felt like New York made a run, you could, at least I wasn't in the building, but you could feel like the energy in the building from the fans get tight. But I appreciated just the Pacers never seemed to get tight. Like the Game 3 nightmares, if you call it that, but it didn't seem like the Pacers really thought about that or ever felt like, oh man, they never got tight like they did in Game 3. So I just enjoyed watching this team just continue to play good team ball, even when the energy in the building seemed to get tight. The Pacers just never did. I
totally
just really
agree.
Enjoyed
how
they played.
I think that's a good call, Evan, in the fact that they, like I said, pace, right? They just kept playing with pace. Squeeze in Sean real quick. Hi, Sean. Happy Wednesday.
Hey, happy Wednesday.
Are you outside right now, Sean, just out of curiosity, or can you see outside just out of curiosity?
I can. I am sitting in a parking lot.
Okay, what side of town are you on, Sean?
I'm on the south side.
How's the weather looking? Because we're trying to figure out whether or not we're getting in a round of golf later today. Looking clear or still raining?
It's still a little rainy, but you might be able to get away with a good round.
All right, fair enough. All right, what's on your mind about Mathurin?
So one of the things that I love about Mathurin, I think you're absolutely right with the Alex Smith effect. We expected him to come in and play like a 5-year vet as a rookie. But that thing that I think the Pacers celebrate, that pace and also that edginess, he plays like a hockey player. He's not afraid of contact. He's going to come right at you and force you to foul him. He's going to get you in foul trouble, and he's still good for points off the bench. He's in a perfect role right now that I think we're all going to love and celebrate through the remainder of this series, and hoping for that finals run. We're only 5 wins away, brother.
It is unbelievable, Sean. I try not to go there to think that they're 5 wins away, and they've got and there is part of me that feels like the window's now. I mean, it's right now, because I think they've got a really good chance of representing the East for many times, when you look at this roster. But then I look at OKC's roster, presuming and assuming that that's who's going to win the West. And Oklahoma City, with their youth and everything they have, it's like, man, I mean, they're going to be around for quite a while. Quite a while. Do you happen to have the breaking news sounder by chance, Eddie? Show announcement to make Eddie Garrison not aware of it. Dustin Dopirak, by the way, going to move to probably about 120 or so. That is because coming up on the other side, top of the hour, a guy last night on the video board that chugged a beer. They showed him, and he said, let's go, and he chugged his beer, and he was one of the former Pacers that was there, and I figured he could give us an outstanding recap of what we saw last night and a breakdown of it, because as a point guard, you're able to see those things. George Hill going to join us other side just about 5 minutes from now. Austin Crozier, 2 o'clock. Dustin Dopirak, about 25 minutes here. Query and Company on the Fan. Our next guest, as a Broad Ripple Rocket, had the 5th most prolific single-season scoring average in Indiana high school basketball history before going to IUPUI, now IU Indy, and enjoying a long NBA career that included many years here as an Indiana Pacer. He was back at the field house last night, and on the video board, he chugged a beer. Now he's on the airport, headed back home. I believe George Hill joining us on the Rhinegeist Brewery guest line. George, how are you?
How you guys doing?
No complaints, man. Listen, the whole city's fired up, right? I mean, here you are, a win away from the NBA Finals. It was great to see you last night up on the board and having fun with it. I wanted to kind of get your breakdown. You know, you're a point guard, so you have that mentality of being able to see games in a different light. What was your assessment of what the Pacers were able to do last night that was effective the most against New York that maybe we had not previously seen?
I mean, I think they, from my perspective, they use their defense to create easy opportunities offensively. I think, you know, the Pacers are doing a great job of dictating how the game goes with physicality. They're hitting first, meaning, you know, you have guys like Drew, Aaron, all picking up full court, making it tough on a guy like Brunson and just being physical. And sometimes we're giving up some cheap fouls, but it's part of the game where they know that we're hitting first and we're dictating where that ball goes most of the time.
I want to go to, because you've been in this situation, obviously, in transition with Halliburton. When you're going the other way, in Indiana, the pace they were able to play, George, I think they're able to get down the floor and kind of seal off like 3 of the New York defenders behind them because they're able to get out faster, right? But that is so based on Halliburton making the decision on whether to be aggressive or whether to go quick pass down floor to, say, a Siakam on the block. Now, from a point guard standpoint, you know, is that an instinctive thing? Do you make the decision before you're even getting the ball which way you're going to go with it? How do you determine which set you're going to go with in that situation, if you will?
I think Rick does a great job of letting them guys play. I think he puts full trust in Tyrese to make the best decisions possible, and as you can see, he's making all the right reads, all the right plays with having, 14, 15 assists last night with 0 turnovers. So to do that in a playoff game is just tremendous, especially coming from a point guard standpoint, playing in a hostile environment for Eastern Conference Finals. But I think, you know, Rick does a great job of putting these guys in situations where it lets them be effective to their strengths and not their weaknesses and letting that ball go. And I think just from playing with him for those last couple months, he's high on the ball movement and taking the best shot, and it's not just a one-man show out there.
What most, George, you know, obviously you know guys on this roster, right? I mean, you came back and you were here 2 years ago. Give me the player not named Tyrese Halliburton or Pascal Siakam that you feel is the glue guy for this team. Is there one that we're overlooking that you look at and you say, both in their vocal leadership and the way they play, an important player for Indiana that doesn't get enough credit is who?
I mean, definitely so. I think we have to really give Miles Turner a lot of credit. He's come a long way. He's flourished into such a great player in his career so far. But like I've been telling everybody else, I personally believe this is Miles Turner's best year on both ends of the floor. I think he's doing a phenomenal job protecting the rim and also being able to stretch the defense out and playing inside. I've been loving watching him play this year on both ends, and I think he's the guy who kind of helped excel this defensive juggernaut that we've been seeing so far, being the glue guy defensively, but at the same time giving a big contribution offensively. But, everyone knows that, but I think Aaron Nesmith has probably been the biggest difference in this team so far. What he's doing on both ends of the floor as far as picking up Brunson between him and, Nembhard doing that job on Brunson night in and night out, picking up full court, not getting tired, but still being able to be effective on the offensive end. He's just come along in these playoffs and playing some of the best basketball, I think, personally, in the whole entire playoffs right now.
You enjoyed, George Hill's our guest on the Rhinegeist Brewery guest line. You enjoyed a career, George, in the NBA of, 15 years, which is incredible and a testament to not only keeping your body in shape, but being obviously a great player, a team player, and all of it. Is there anything that when you watched last night, is there anything that you noticed now watching from afar as opposed to being on the floor that you had not really noticed as a player that stands out to you about this particular Pacer team?
I mean, those young guys get up and down the floor fast. You know, when we were playing, it was more back to the basket, play inside, outside, wasn't a lot of threes. But it was a more physical type of a game where it's a lot of banging going on. But I think the speed of the game is enhanced times 10 to me personally from seeing it from the outside in now, being able to sit there front row and see how fast these guys are getting up and down the floor. But there was at one point last game, game 3, where we got a steal, kicked it up to Tyrese to somebody to a lob, and the ball never hit the floor, not once. That just shows you how fast, you know, that we're getting up and down the floor. But at the same time, it's when you see sometime New York scores in 4 seconds, we're laying the ball up at the other end. Just the tempo and the speed of the game makes it dangerous for 20-point leads because they don't exist like that anymore. Like a 20-point lead is easy to come back from because of the tempo of the game, where back then, you know, a 20-point lead, you might as well pack your stuff up and go home because the game was so slow.
How much do you think, George, that Rick Carlisle – I'm curious of this. I mean, you played the point guard position, okay? How many offensive sets that you're watching Indiana do are orchestrated or called out plays by a Rick Carlisle? Or is he basically handed the keys over to Halliburton and said, you create, you improvise, and run our offense to an extent, but you guys know what you're doing? What balance would you say that is?
I mean, when I was there, it wasn't predicated. We had a lot of plays. Like, let's be serious. Rick has a Rolodex of plays, and we go over them. But his biggest thing that he doesn't want to do is sit there and just slow us down and call plays. So what he always tells us, I don't have to call the plays if we use our defense to inspire our offense. But I also think that he lets the guards, he's very big on letting the players dictate what's going on in the game. So if you see something that you want to exploit, most people have that respect to do it. I think that he trusts a guy like Tyrese to make the right decisions, and I think they're such a young team but such a well put together team that they all complement each other just so well. So it's easy to do this play or do that play based off of the relationships they have and the continuity that they've been playing with for the last couple of years.
George, you said you're flying back home. I assume you're flying back to Texas now, right? To your ranch with your 20 oxen, zebras, and everything else, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you told me you're on a layover. Now, can I guess what airport you're currently in?
You can probably guess. It's only 2 that you can fly into going to Texas.
Okay. So I'm going to go with I'm just going with the law of averages. I'm going to go with Chicago first. Are you in Chicago?
Nope.
Okay. Atlanta would be my other guess.
No, I'm all the way in Texas. I'm in Houston.
Well, you could drive from there, right? I mean, how far is the drive from Houston to San Antonio? What, 3-4 hours?
Yeah, 3 hours, 20 minutes.
Well, I guess, excuse me, if you got to wait for the plane, so be it. It gives us a chance to talk to you, which is cool. Was that the first time you've been back to a game since you played for the Pacers?
That's been the first time I've been back to a Pacer game. I went to one other game. So my first time really going to a game since I stepped away from it was this year. Milwaukee came in town and played the Spurs. So, you know, my other team that I was a part of, I went to go watch them play. I didn't get to do the Pacers because they went to France. But, you know, this was the first time I got back into Gamebridge since I left. And it was such a great experience and so much love being shown. It just really meant a lot, you know, being from there in Indianapolis, playing there. I just always wished I could give them that same experience that this team is doing so far for the city of Indianapolis.
Was it emotional for you?
In a good way, not like tears of thing, but like it was emotional in a good way because that was something I've always dreamed about, you know, growing up as a little kid, sitting in the back row of Market Square Arena up at the top against the wall where everybody looked like little ants. We used to pay $5 to get a ticket and try to work our way down just to get autographs. So to be at that point and to have a career there and be able to come home and play there and to see what has grown to today, that's the emotional part. I always just wish our team could have brought, a championship to Indianapolis, but I'll definitely take us bringing one right now. It'd be such a bittersweet moment.
Could this team do it? I mean, they're 5 wins away, and presumably, if they are if they're able to not get the knockout blow here against New York, it's probably going to be Oak City. Can Indiana do it?
I think we have every tool to do it. I think it's all going to predicate on possessions, treating every possession like it matters, taking care of the ball, and finishing quarters. As we know, that playoffs is about possession, so it's about can we stop momentum from carrying on for a long period of time. And the team that stop runs and don't give the momentum up is normally the team that wins the game most of the time.
Okay, lastly, George, I don't know how many times you were in. George Hill is our guest, Ryan Geist Brewery guest line. Before we let you get on your plane there to San Antonio, let me ask you this. I don't know how many times you were in situations where you were playing either to knock a team out or to avoid being eliminated, but that is more difficult on which team psychologically, and how long, what would you look for Indiana that's going to tell you in game 5 or 6 whether or not they're in fact going to be able to move on?
I think it's harder for the team that's getting eliminated because the team that isn't we're not playing for anything. The pressure's not on us. We just have to continue to do what we're doing. The pressure is on the team that's going home, right? I believe that if Indiana continues to just play the right way like they've been doing all playoffs long, share that ball, play defense, and just seeing the smiles on their face, they're enjoying playing with each other, and they're enjoying the life of playing basketball in the playoffs. If they continue just to do those things, we will come out with a victory in New York. And what sweet moment would it be to become the Eastern Conference champs in Madison Square Garden in front of all the Knicks fans? It would just be the best written story that you can think about.
George, we certainly, if the Pacers are to advance into the NBA Finals, certainly hope to see you at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. At the very least, maybe we'll see you back at IU Indy once they open up their new arena. But either way, obviously, you're always welcome back in Indy, and it was great to have you back last night.
No, thanks for having me.
George Hill joining us on the Ryan Geist Brewery guest line. Good perspective there. A guy that played for Rick Carlisle, played for the Pacers. I know that I've told this story before while we transition here to Dustin Dopirak from the Indianapolis Star, who will join us next in just a couple of minutes here. Back when I worked at Channel 6, and we used to do a thing called the Star of the Week. I've told this story before, but I love telling it because I'm just a huge George Hill fan, admittedly, for this reason. I worked with Dave first. We worked at Channel 6 together, and we had a thing every Tuesday, the WRTV Star of the Week. And one night, invariably, Dave and I would forget about it, or it would sneak up on us. Oh, man, we got to do a Star of the Week tomorrow. And I said to Dave, well, there's this kid at Broadwell that's averaging like 36 a game, like 37. So it's unbelievable. So he said, well, let's make him the Star of the Week. He was a junior at the time. So I go to Broadwell High School, and we get there, and practice is getting ready to get underway, and Bill Smith was their head coach, and he had not yet arrived. And guys are running around, and they're doing layup drills, and they're dunking, and, they're kind of screwing off. School just ended. And George Hill was one, comes out, and when he walked on the floor, like, everyone stopped. And he basically said, okay, here's what we're doing in practice. And, like, he led the practice till Bill Smith got there. And I thought, holy cow. I mean, most of these guys were seniors anyway. So I give him the Star of the Week award. IPS school in Broadwell was not getting a lot of attention at that time. And so I give him the award. Hey, you're Star of the Week, Channel 6 Star of the Week, whatever. Gets a plaque. I leave. 3 or 4 years later, I mean, he obviously then goes to IUPUI, has a good career, becomes a first-round pick of the Spurs, has a successful rookie campaign. I'm in the Indianapolis airport going to an IndyCar event in the summer, and I'm sitting there at my gate, and this guy comes up and taps me on the shoulder, and I look up, and it's George Hill, and I'm like, hey, And he says, hey, didn't you used to work at a TV station here? And I said, yeah, I worked at Channel 6 in Indy. And he says, well, I just remember you came out and gave me the Star of the Week award, and I wanted to come over and thank you because I thought that was really neat. And I'm thinking, this guy's a rookie in the NBA now and was a first-round draft pick and still remembers that. I just have always found him to be an incredibly engaging and down-to-earth and really intelligent, I'd say young man, but, adult now. So thank you to George Hill for his time. Joining us now on the Ryan Geist Brewing guest line, of course, he is the writer from the Indianapolis Star. It is Dustin
Dopirak
that joins us on the program. Dustin, we'll start with this. Last night, Tyrese Halliburton, is that his finest performance as a Pacer?
It's up there. I mean, it's weird to think of it that way just because of some of the late game heroics. Because he doesn't the stat line is just flawless. But I mean, you've just seen so many signature moments that happen because of circumstance, and it feels weird to put it up there with one where he hit a game winner. Especially when he's had three in these playoffs that have been incredible. I mean, you pack some of the biggest parts of it into the last minute or 30 seconds or whatever, and so it's weird to put it there. But I mean, numbers wise, it has to be. I mean, 32, 15, 12, 4. I mean, the 4 steals is a big deal. It's one of those things where you go all the way to the end and you're like, and he had 4 steals and no turnovers. Just looking at that, he got the Pacers the ball more than he gave it away. And so he does that much on defense. I think from a two-way impact standpoint, you almost have to say it is. There have been some games where I think he's been, he's shot better, or he's distributed better. I mean, what do you have, a 22 assist performance last year? So there have been other ones that you could put up with it, but I mean, I think when you consider the two-way impact there, that is what he was able to do on the defensive end, which is not, usually his strong suit. Probably all the way around it probably is, but I mean, I think there's others that you could sit there and think about, over the course. I mean, I remember he had a 44-point game against Miami a couple years ago where he had a game winner, and that's a regular season game, but just all the crazy stuff he's done over these playoffs, game winner he hit against Milwaukee last year. There are some others you could definitely put up in the category and have an argument, but I would probably go so far as to say, considering stakes, considering two-way impact, it probably is the best, performance he's had.
Did Benedict Mathurin make the most of what could have been one of his last attempts to get and stay in regular rotation before he fell the way of Jarris Walker and Thomas Bryant? Or were they going to continue to go to that well and finally he just was able to uncork it?
I think more they were going to continue to go that well. I mean, I think, Rick Carlisle's are aware of his importance. Rick Carlisle's aware of what he means to the team, to the franchise. He's aware of what they've invested in him, but also it was really notable to me because I asked Rick about Mathurin in pregame, and he said he's going to be ready. And it was just he wasn't trying to delve into what his last couple weeks have been like and what, he hadn't done particularly well. And obviously Rick sort of has those sort of circumstances where he's like, I'm just not going to go there with you. So that's not necessarily new, but it's, I mean, if I really just track what Rick has said about Mathurin over the course of the year, and he had some really insightful stuff, somewhere towards the course of the end of the season, after they'd moved Neesmith over there, after he had that stretch where he had a bunch of 20-point games, and then he had a game where he didn't really produce all that much. He really kind of delved into just how difficult the scenario is in terms of getting Ben to fit in this, and just naturally, he's the guy who's most naturally somebody who doesn't necessarily fit this system, but he's too talented to, and he also works too hard to not make this work. And he really, you look at what he contributed, it really was stuff that fit within the system. And I think the moment that they really just sort of most freaked out about what he did was this kick out 3 to Siakam, where he really ran the floor well, had the ball for a split second after he gets the ball from McConnell, and sees 2 bodies and moves the ball to the corner. And that's exactly what they've been asking for him to do. But he's still just so talented as a one-on-one guy. And I think even if they move on from him, I think Rick Carlisle will say that he respected how much Benedict Mathurin tried to make this work and tried to fit in the system as best as he could, and how hard he worked to try to make himself a better player while he was in Indiana. Because he keeps doing that, because he keeps investing in him, Rick Carlisle is going to keep giving him chances. And even if it's not the most natural fit, he wants to make it work and wants to give him every opportunity to have a good experience about this, even if it leads to them moving on. I mean, I think he's going to always respect the contributions that Ben Mathurin made. So I think they were going to keep going to that well, but he did obviously help himself a whole lot. This is going to give him more opportunities. But I mean, like they might have shrunk. They might have gotten fewer minutes and fewer minutes if he couldn't put together a performance like this. But I think Rick Carlisle really wanted it for him. I think he really wanted to keep giving him chances until he got this opportunity. I think there's a lot of people who think Rick doesn't like Ben, and that's really not true. I can't stress that enough. I mean, Rick really respects what Mathurin does. He just obviously recognizes that the fit is less natural than it is for Aaron Nesmith and even Ben Shepherd. But he really wants this to go well for Ben, regardless of how long Mathurin sticks around. He wants him to get the most out of this opportunity. So I think Rick was really happy that Mathurin performed the way that he did.
Do you believe they are going to move on from him?
I mean, probably just because the money doesn't work. It just when you get down to dollars and cents in the long term, it's just like, okay, like if you're Mathurin's agent, you have to know that there's more financial opportunity elsewhere, and there's got to be a place where he fits better. I don't know if they move on from him this offseason. They might try to stick around and try to make it work as best as they can. And it's tough because he's definitely the type of guy that you can move on from and you find yourself kicking yourself 5 years from now when he ends up being he could end up being an all-star someplace else. They're they want to re-sign Miles Turner, and so that they're probably going to have to go into the luxury tax to do it. And it's like, okay, like, well, then what can you give Ben Mathurin? I think you probably do have to offer him an extension this offseason, but there's a line that you probably can't go past. And so if he's not going to take, $15 million or even $20 million or whatever it is, and that might even be a high number, then the ask yourself, okay, then do you have to, get something back for him? And when do you have to do that? Do you have to do that this offseason? Do you have to do it next deadline? Where does that work? And what do you, how important is it to get something you need? What do you need? Basically, I mean, you still don't really know the answer to that question because, shoot, you could win a title. And, maybe you never get the answer of what's the next piece because you're already there. It's a very difficult, I think, question to know what to do with him. Again, I think if you're Chad Buchanan, you're still sort of waiting to see some things play out to know, because again, if you fall short against Oklahoma City, you're going to get some answers in terms of what you need. If you win a title, then you win a title, and it's kind of interesting to figure out, okay, well, what do you do next? And so they're in an interesting place as far as that's concerned. I mean, like, my answer is probably, they probably eventually have to bite that bullet, but they do like him, and I think they do want to see it work. It's just a question of how do you make that work financially.
From the Indianapolis Star, joining us on the Ryan Geist Brewery guest line is Dustin
Dopirak.
Dustin, I thought in Game 3 you had to give some credit to Tom Thibodeau for making the adjustment of inserting Mitchell Robinson into the double center lineup essentially. Last night, Karl Anthony Towns was not as effective. He is still a really difficult matchup. He looks banged up to me down the stretch. But what adjustments did Rick Carlisle make for Game 4, and does he stand pat with that, or do they now have to shift again to come up with a different look for Game 5?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest thing was they were going to run it regardless. I mean, I think that's Tyrese Halliburton came out and he said it really felt like he let the team down in Game 3 because he felt like there were opportunities to push, and he slowed it down in part because they had a big lead, and he just didn't do a good enough job of getting everybody organized, and I guess maybe just didn't feel as confident pushing the ball just because he didn't feel like everything was in alignment. And this time he was just like, heck with it, we're running regardless of what's going on. We're going to take risks, we're going to push the ball, and we trust that. We're going to just believe in that, and maybe it won't work out as well as you want to every single time, but if you're just relentless on it, then that's what you got to do, and that's the best way they're going to be able to run it up against those guys. It was just creating the pace and creating the game to be that way. I mean, I think they didn't necessarily do a great job of slowing the Knicks down defensively. I mean, they were able to do a lot of things that they want to do and hit some big shots. The Pacers just hit more because they just kept running and they just kept pushing the pace, kept getting after it. That was enough for it to come together for him. I mean, I'm trying to think of just even how they were defending. I know they ran some double teams to Towns and stuff like that, and they can sort of trust that and just maybe continue to believe in that they were fortunate enough to get some guys in foul trouble. Obviously got Josh Hart to foul out. OG Anunoby ends up with 5. That ends up, creating good situations for them because, you're running the ball at them and you're forcing them to either, foul you or give you up a layup. And they created some of those scenarios and that kind of worked things out. Again, like I don't know if there was a defensive matchup there. I mean, another thing, one thing that they've done with Robinson is they've continued to throw Tony Bradley out there, and he's done really good work. I mean, I think he was plus 10, and so I think he is going to stick with that. I think you're still going to see some Tony Bradley minutes to match up with Mitchell Robinson when it's just a scenario of, hey, Tony, just get in Mitchell's way. Just get in his way. Do what you can. When you don't want him on Towns necessarily because he's probably not going to win that matchup. But if you just create physicality against Robinson, just get in his way, just put a body on him, box him out as much as you can. That slows him down some, and he was more effective than Thomas Bryant as far as getting in his way, and that's been effective. So I think they'll stick with that. But the most important thing is just create pace so that you're in a better position to score than they are.
Yeah, I thought Tony Bradley's and look, there's nothing that overly jumps out at you about him, but Dustin, he's given them good minutes. I mean, why do you believe that it's Bradley, same initials I realize, and not Bryant that they've gone with in that position? What does he bring to the table that Bryant does not that is a better fit for this series?
He's just a little bit better rebounder, a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. Like Bryant gives you a lot of other stuff. There's a reason why he's been the second center ahead of Bradley, and he's obviously just more comfortable with the ball in his hands, better shooter, better overall offensive presence, and if you if you need him to go out on the perimeter and defend, he might be a little bit better there. He can get out of sorts when it comes to that sort of thing too. But he's had some big contributions. I mean, he had some big contributions in the Cleveland series. But I mean, Bradley he's just a little bit bigger. I mean, just in terms of like rebounding is more of a strength. He is just more put together as far as his ability to just get in somebody's way, block out, and be steady with that. I mean, he only had one offensive rebound in this game. That was his only board. But I mean, it's just it still matters when you're getting in somebody's way. There's a lot of times where you might not get the statistic, but someone else goes and gets a rebound because you kept Mitchell Robinson off the board. Certainly, Tyrese Halliburton in part has 12 rebounds because Tony Bradley was on the floor for a lot of that. He did play a significant amount of minutes with the first unit, and so that leads to some space for Tyrese Halliburton to go chase the ball down where Mitchell Robinson might have been there otherwise. So like he's just a little bit steadier on that. I mean, obviously, he's playing not desperate, but like both Bradley and Bryant have they're like grateful is kind of one of the biggest ways to describe them. And both of those guys, obviously Bryant wasn't playing at all in Miami, and Bradley was in the G League and wasn't sure if he was ever going to make it back. And both of those guys have been really just inspired by the fact that they get a chance. They get an opportunity, and Bradley's just been happy to have an opportunity to be in uniform and be in the NBA, even if he hasn't played very much. And so when he's been asked to do something, he's just been like, yeah, sure, what is it? And from the beginning, it was just like Bradley, was told like, hey, rebounding is going to be your thing. Whenever you play, that's the one thing you're focused on. Everything else, try what you can. We'll take what we get from you, as far as points, as far as overall defense. But when you're in there, you go get boards. That's the one thing you're really thinking about. And you've seen that. Basically you've seen that mentality come out, and he's just the one thing he's been thinking about is just all he's considering when he's on the floor is box out Mitchell Robinson. That is the only thing on his mind, and he's been good at it.
Okay, lastly, Dustin, forward answer. You got to go with one of these two. Forward answer. Win in 5. Well, I guess forward would be win in game 5, return for game 6. Which is it? Win in game 5, return for game 6. Forward answer, go.
Win in game 5.
Look at that. All right. All right, let's go. All right, Dustin, enjoy New York. And then next time we'll be talking to you, I guess it will be for the NBA Finals for the Indiana Pacers. Appreciate it as always.
Seems that way. Thanks for having me on, as always.
All right, Ryan Geist Brewery guest line and the flexible because he was able to hang on a little bit so we could get George Hill on. That is Dustin
Dopirak.
Thank you, from the Indianapolis Star. Austin Crozier in 30. We need to pick it up. I need to, not anybody else. I got like a little bit of a head cold, right, just from the no sleep for 3 weeks. So we need to pick it up. I need to pick up the energy, pick up the pace. A game away from the NBA Finals for the blue and gold. Why the hell not Indiana? Harrison is feverishly working on a piece in terms of how this Pacers team was assembled. You had just thrown me the trivia question of a trade of July of 2023. It took me, I believe, 2 guesses, 3 maybe, before I came up with the fact that that was 2 second-round picks to the New York Knicks for Obi Toppin, correct?
Yep.
Would you like to throw to me another acquisition transaction and see if I can tell you what player you're talking about that was acquired?
Okay. Let's go here. Let's see. February 6th, 2022.
Okay. That would be 2 first-round picks, future first-round picks. I'm trying to remember if there was a player involved. Was there a player involved for the Pacers standpoint going out?
Yes.
Did they need a passport to go to the place where they were traded?
No.
So this was not the Siakam deal.
No, Siakam was in 24.
That's right. He was okay, this was 22, you said?
2022, yeah.
Okay, so this would be Domas Sabonis.
That's 2 days after this trade.
Okay. Outstanding. So let me think. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to go with Malcolm Brogdon.
No.
Okay.
That was July 9th of 2022.
Okay. And this was what date again? February of 22?
February 6th, 2022. Yep.
The player that was acquired is how marquee for the Pacers now?
So the player at the time was not in the NBA when it was acquired.
Was it a pick that allowed them to acquire?
That is correct.
I'm going to say that the Pacers sent a half-eaten Kevin Pritchard lunch and 2 bags of Doritos to somebody for a late first-round or early second-round pick that they used to take Andrew Nembhard.
So you are somewhat correct. Yes.
It was a full lunch.
Yeah. Karis LeVert and the Heat 2022 second-round pick that turned into Luke Travers to the Cavaliers for Ricky Rubio, a lottery-protected first-round pick that the Pacers used to select Ben Shepherd, a 2022 second-round pick from Houston that turned into Andrew Nembhard, and a 2027 second-round pick from the Utah Jazz that the Pacers still own today.
That's a coup right there. That's a coup right there. And where the Pacers, what they have done remarkably well. Bill Polian used to say that if you hit like around 40 or 50% of the draft, you were doing well. Ben Shepherd, when they took, and think about that, they took Ben Shepherd ahead of Andrew Nembhard, right?
Yes.
But they hit on that.
Theoretically, yeah. There were 2 different draft classes, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but they hit on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Shepherd was a pick. Shepherd was in a draft where they had 2 picks, right? Shepherd and Walker in the same draft class, right?
Yes.
So they took Walker first and then Shepherd. But when you hit on a Ben Shepherd, that's a huge coup. And again, Shepherd does something. He has a skill set that is invaluable. And I think Tony Bradley has this as well. And that is knowing how to play within yourself. The Pacers in this group do that as well as anybody in basketball. I would go so far as to say, you know, I was thinking about this. The Pacers' last and only NBA Finals team. And to me, the 98 team to me is the best team in Pacers NBA history. And that team, you had Mark Jackson was your point guard. Reggie Miller was your shooting guard. Your small forward in 98 was Mullen. By 2000, that had become Jalen Rose. Okay. And then, obviously, your power forward is Dale Davis. Your center is Smits. Antonio Davis backing those up. By 2000, Antonio Davis is gone. And you had Jonathan Bender there, and then later maybe Eric Dampier. But regardless. If you look at that 2000 team or 98 team, either one, different styles and different eras of basketball. But this particular group may, in fact, be better all the way across the board because Tyrese Halliburton is very superior to Mark Jackson. Jackson was very good for the style of play in that era, but Halliburton in his ability to set pace is superior. Obviously, Reggie Miller, I think, is a better player than Nembhard, although Nembhard is very good and very underrated and a very good defender. Outside of that, I mean, Miles Turner and Smith's probably a draw. Smith's maybe more gifted a little bit. I don't even know if you'd say more gifted offensively. The power forward, it's kind of a moot point because it's a different era and a different style of play. But the point I'm making is this. I've mentioned several times before. I remember when Reggie Miller was getting ready to retire and I was interviewing different Pacer executives about his acquisition and asked, did you know when you drafted him that he was a franchise player? And they basically said, well, no, you don't know that when you draft a guy, but you can see if the making is there. And by like year 3, you've got to make a determination on which way you're going with it. And that's why they decided to part ways with Chuck Person because Reggie Miller was the piece they were going to build around. And then when they traded Detlef Schrempf for Derek McKee, and people were, literally people in this town were like, what in the world are they doing? Detlef Schrempf was an all-NBA level player, or at least an all-star peripherally player and a very good scorer. And, Derek McKee, this guy, all he does is guard people. Well, then they got Dale Davis, and now suddenly Dale and Antonio Davis are setting screens that are opening things up for Reggie Miller. Derek McKee is defending and taking wing pressure off of Reggie Miller. And each piece of the puzzle came together where then at the end of the fact, you were able to look at it and go, that's a tapestry right there. I didn't think it as we were acquiring each respective piece of cloth. But once we put it together, holy cow, lights out. And I think you could see the same thing with this team. Ben Shepherd, in a lot of places, maybe is a guy that is Chris Duarte and barely gets off the bench anymore. But he perfectly fits with what they need from him here. And Andrew Nembhard, and each respective piece as it happened seemingly was just kind of a blip in the radar. But now you look at it and you go, what a tapestry. And they may be entering into a period here in the East where they're going to be able to do this and make these kinds of deep runs annually for the next 3 to 5 years. Now, challenge is going to be if they get to the finals again, if this is the beginning of, and yes, Detroit is a team on the rise. There's a lot that goes into getting to this point, and they're not there yet. I get it. They're not there yet. You still need another win. I get it. I don't want to put that cart before the horse, but I will for the sake of this discussion right now. There is one thing that I think may be pushing back a little bit for them, and that's the fact that Oak City is going nowhere anytime soon. And they're very young, and they are wildly, wildly successful. They're fantastic, and they are deep. Lord, are they deep. By the way, I have a question that I need to ask Eddie to get me up to date and up to speed because I've been in a cave for the last 3 weeks. I've been at 16th and Georgetown in a cave for like 3 weeks. And there's a sports question that's been burning on my mind, and Eddie is the guy that has his finger on the pulse of things going on beyond just the esoteric bubble with which I live. And so I'm going to ask Eddie that question next, and Austin Crosher joins us in 18. Okay, so for the last 2 weeks, was obviously pretty engrossed in what was going on with the race and the Pacers, right? I mean, those are the two big stories in town. And yes, we're talking almost entirely today about the Pacers, as we should.
One may say blinded by the light, Jake.
That's right. Was blinded by the light. There wasn't a lot of light on race day, but yes. But here is my question for you in terms of big sports stories that were brewing and percolating and bubbling over just about the time that I went into this cave, okay?
Don't think it's a coincidence, Jake, that I was the one day I was at the track, there was no sunshine, so.
You were blocking it while you were walking around?
Yeah.
By the way, was it cold where you were sitting?
It was breezy. It was very breezy.
Did you dress appropriately for the race?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Did you dress appropriately?
I had on, let me tell you what I had on for the race. For the race, I know that this year, like the Sunday before Memorial Day came earlier than most, but for the race, this is what I had on. I had on the required, and we got 64 emails telling us it was required, the required Radio Network uniform golf shirt, right? Then underneath that, I had, or excuse me, over that, I had a zip up that also was, part of the gear that we get. So I had a 3/4 inch zip up over that. Then I had a jacket, like a windbreaker type jacket over that. And then on top of all that, once I got up to the perch, I had my like puffer coat and a winter hat, like a snow hat. I might still have the hat with me in the bag. I can put it on right here. So yes, it was chilly. But during the time that I was out there, the one thing that I realized after the fact has gotten away from me is keeping abreast of some of those stories that are percolating and whatever else, okay? And it has nothing to do with necessarily local sports, but if we're going to step aside for a split second about the Pacers, I will ask, whatever happened with the Aaron Rodgers story?
I wish I knew. I don't care, so I don't follow it.
That was like every day. Am I wrong here? All we heard about for like a week straight was Aaron Rodgers and where he's going to go, and is Pittsburgh going to sign Aaron Rodgers, and Rodgers he's going to let teams know within a week what his decision is and whatever else. The constant like circling drama like Pigpen that is Aaron Rodgers, and then it just all went away. Is this what happens now? Are we at the point now? And I believe, here's what I think has happened in sports today. Hear me out, okay?
I'm hearing you out.
If I may.
Uh-huh.
Once upon a time, and for people, I want everybody to listen to this so that it gives you an idea of where we are in the landscape today, because as the Pacers are getting ready to catapult themselves into the upper stratosphere of talking point attention, and people are like, you never hear about, these teams, and I never watch ESPN anymore because they, all it is that, whatever. Here's what's happened to sports media. Several years ago, and I don't have the years in front of me, I'm just going to spitball years off the top of my head. Okay, a good example. I remember being at the Super Bowl in, I think, 2000, and there were people there that were there to promote TiVo. You could buy TiVo. And I'm like, what is TiVo? And they're like, it's a new thing that you can get where you can rewind your television. I'm like, what? That was right around the time when everybody still had cable television, and it was getting ready to get into the cord-cutting, streaming, unlimited access, unlimited real estate of channels, Xfinity and, all of the different, Spectrum and all of the options, okay? When that happened at that time, 25 years ago, long time ago I realize, and I'm spitballing years, but roughly, you essentially had ABC, ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC, and then ESPN. Those were your sports viewing networks. When all of a sudden, the over-the-air networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS and Fox, those four said, wait a minute. Now that people are going to Xfinity and Spectrum and everything else, there's unlimited real estate now. We've just discovered, we just did the Louisiana purchase now, and there's all this land out west that we can purchase. And now all of a sudden, there's unlimited number of channels where people can view whatever it is they want. If they want table tennis, there's a table tennis network that's channel 678 on their cable. And they all looked at it and said, ESPN is snatching up all of the broadcast rights for Major League Baseball and the National Hockey League and NBA games and whatever else. Now that we have unlimited real estate on where to put programming, let's create the NBC Sports Network. Let's create FS1 and FS2. Let's create the CBS Sports Network. And what we will do is, by doing that, we're going to scare ESPN into thinking that they are going to lose their broadcast rights because they're going to say, oh my gosh, now all of a sudden the main networks have cable options as well to put games in broadcast rights. So instead of $500 million for broadcast rights to Major League Baseball, we're going to have to pay $900 million to scare these guys away. And Fox and NBC and all of them, not ABC because that's ESPN, but all of those other networks said, look, we don't really have intention of putting the National Hockey League on our network. We don't really have the intention of putting Major League Baseball on our network. But what we're doing is we're forcing ESPN and ABC to pay 3 times what they normally would or double what they normally would previously because we're scaring them into thinking that we're going to take broadcast rights away from them. And the executive said, well, that's great, but if we don't get those broadcast rights and all we're doing is pushing up the price that ESPN has to pay, then what are we supposed to do with these networks that we created that are sports networks and we have no games to show? And they said, no problem. All we'll do with that is put on talk shows. And we'll have hosts that say outlandish, ridiculous things so that people continue to see in the headlines what Skip Bayless had to say. People will see in the headlines what Shannon Sharp had to say. People will see in the headlines what Colin Cowherd had to say. And yes, we don't expect that means that they're going to watch and listen every single day to what these guys are saying, but they are now in this new thing called social media or in their newspaper or whatever. They're seeing consistent references to FS1, FS2, CBS Sports Network with Jim Rome, whatever it may be, so that it is keeping those networks viable and afloat enough when in reality their only purpose is as a threat to the people who are paying big-time money to force them to make even more and limit the amount of profit they're getting so that then some of the auxiliary programming comes your way. And because of that fact, there was counter-programming of the sports talk hot take stuff that then oversaturated us with Tebow Mania and Linsanity and Aaron Rodgers. And it became exhaustive, yes, but it was all by design and all by strategy. But the Rodgers one, because ESPN now kind of picks certain storylines and sticks with them and exhausts them and beats them to death, and that's me saying that. Have I told you, by the way, that there were not really 300,000 people at the NFL draft? But regardless, they do that. And they create storylines, but sometimes those storylines just fade away, and it feels like the Aaron Rodgers storyline is one of them. Like, whatever happened with it?
Like, here's the recent one to me that I don't understand, Jake, is there's been a lot of discourse on ESPN as of late about, are there any great teams left in the NBA playoffs? Or is Tyrese Halliburton a superstar? This, that, and the other. They are the broadcast network partner of the NBA Finals, and they're going to sit here and complain once the NBA Finals are over, when it's Indiana and Oklahoma City, and they're going to complain about, oh, look at the ratings. Well, when your network television talk shows during the day
Correct.
are belittling and downplaying these teams, what do you expect?
Yeah, that's fair. Because the NBA is a stars league, always has been. And the only thing keeping Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Tyrese Halliburton from being mega stars is probably the market they're playing in. But at the same time, Cleveland ain't some big glamorous market, and LeBron James was the biggest star on the planet. So maybe there's a little bit of contradiction there on my behalf. I always got a kick out of it from an NFL standpoint when people said, nobody wants to go to Indianapolis because you just don't get the marketability. And I'm like, yeah, because Peyton Manning wasn't in enough commercials. Really? Now, Lucky didn't see in a lot of commercials. Did he just not want to do them?
I'm sure that's what it was, Chick.
What's that?
I'm sure he just didn't want to do commercials.
Honestly.
Didn't he do one with, like, body armor or something like that? It was like a disco party.
He owned it. Remember, he bought part ownership of that.
Oh, it was like him, Kobe Bryant, and some others, right?
That's right, yeah. But Manning's the master at it. Austin Crozier, by the way, joins us next. Now, Eddie, you've known me now for what, a couple of years, right?
Absolutely.
You would list me, I'm assuming, as a very psychologically strong individual, right? No insecurities, very confident, not easily rattled, correct?
Outside of needing some occasional, let's see, what's the right word I'm looking for here? Validation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me tell you, and again, I'm not no bruise to the ego here at all, right? I'm completely fine with this.
Well, your humility is the number one trait about you, right?
Well, yes. When you list all the things about what make me great, which is a long list, humility's at the top of the list. But Austin Crosher, who has been a guest on the program, a regular, we know, dog lover, right?
Yeah.
And I thought it was very kind of him. Sunday morning sends me a thing. Have a great call today, really, and love listening to the radio network. Great. And then afterwards, I just said, hey, I hope it sounded okay. And he said, yeah, didn't catch anything on the radio. Now, what in the hell's that all about, right?
At least he was thinking of you, Jake.
Yeah,
to
what was
wish
going
you
on?
luck on the call.
I guess the doggy had to go back to the dentist, and so he just didn't get a chance to listen on the radio. He joins us now on the Rhinegeist Brewery guest line, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so now. Austin Crosher. Austin, that was a lie, right? You listened to the entire radio from flag to flag, correct?
The whole thing, yep. I just, we're working on that humility thing. I was just playing along.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it never sounded better. Hey, let's get to this about last night. Not the movie, but rather what happened at Gamebridge Fieldhouse. I'll ask you what I'd asked Dustin earlier, but I think you could offer a good perspective on it. I thought this series has become at times kind of a chess match between Thibodeau and Carlisle. And I thought Tom Thibodeau made a really good adjustment going with the double bigs of Robinson and Towns, and it kind of threw Indiana off a little bit in Game 3. Do you think Indiana schematically came up with any sort of a counter, or did they just simply play faster last night?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, with Thibodeau, I like that he did something, right, by going with the double bigs. And, lots of times that reeks of panic. But when you're down 2-1 on the road, you have to win, that game, or excuse me, 2-0. You have to win that game. Sometimes it is panic. And they did something different. And I can't say for 100% that it contributed to the win, right? I think it was more Towns kind of going off in the second half, in particular the fourth quarter. But, sometimes that's just something done differently will get a spark out of your team. And certainly that's what happened in Game 3. And because it worked, they stuck with it in Game 4. They didn't get a whole lot of production out of Hart in Game 3. I thought he did better coming off of the bench, but I think that they're grasping at straws a little bit, and they found something that worked and stuck with it.
Austin, when you were a player, and I don't know how often it was the case, and by no means am I expecting you to know off the top of your head, but were you in playoff series where you were on either side of a 3-1 deficit, either on the short side or on the good side of that? I would assume you were on a couple of occasions, correct?
Yeah, I would assume both. The Isaiah years, we were a very young team, made the playoffs all years, but lost in the first round, so I would have to assume that. And then, obviously, the Bird years, I'm sure we were up 3-1 many times. Close to those series out, so for sure.
By the way, move back 2 steps to the left wherever you were when we first got a hold of you, because better reception there. But the reason I ask, in your opinion, as a guy who's played in the league, when it's 3-1, there's more. And I realize that if you lose a game and your season's over with, there's a pressure there, right? But how hard is it on the other side of that when you're up 3-1 to get that knockout game? And how much do you weigh into your head not?
We've talked about this each time you've had me on. It's just such a psychological component to the playoffs, and closing out a series is a very big part of that. It's interesting. The Pacers lost the Game 3 against both Cleveland and New York, and I thought really responded in Game 4. And then the way that they went into Cleveland for Game 5 is what I'm assuming the same personality you're going to see from the Pacers in New York. Is there more pressure? I think it's more you just when you've got someone down, you want to step on their throat a little bit, not give them any reason for hope or any fluke thing that could potentially happen, in that game 6 type of thing. And I mean, the Pacers just played so well on the road. And, with Towns with his knee, is he going to be 100%? And I think it's a Knicks team that has very similar to Cleveland, since that kind of emotional win at Cleveland's game 2, the Knicks, it was game 1. They have not seemed whole, their opponents. And, when you have that opportunity to take a team out, you do it. And I think that's what you're going to see in terms of a mentality.
Austin Crozier's our guest. He's on the Rhinegeist Brewery guest line. Rhinegeist, by the way, now the 16th largest craft brewer in the United States, available from Zinc, distributing here in Indianapolis. Austin, the last night in that game, Halliburton was brilliant. We'll get to that. Siakam was solid. We'll get to that too. But I thought Mathurin, that was the game he needed. When you were a player, whether it was yourself or a teammate, when a guy just has a game where you feel like the sands of the hourglass are going through before you quit going back to that well, do teammates talk to a guy like that? I mean, do they say to a guy like, look, man, we need you, or hey, we believe in you, or is it like a guy with a no-hitter? You just kind of stay away from it, don't touch it, and let it work itself out?
Well, being a bench player, in general, especially in the playoffs, you really are always kind of picking and choosing your spots. What do you need? Staying ready, for those moments when they come. And I always had Derek McKee was, probably the most influential teammate I had during my career, because he was always coming up to me. And Derek comes across as a guy that never talks, right?
Correct.
But he was great in that kind of leadership role, pulling me aside one-on-one. It wasn't in a rah-rah manner, but just stay ready. This is the guy you're guarding. This is what you need to do. And I'm sure that Mathurin has someone like that. And for Mathurin, it's been hard, right? He started most of the beginning of the year. He's been in and out of the starting lineup. Even coming off of the bench, his minutes have been in the high 20s. And hasn't been as effective. Has had a little bit quicker of a hook in terms of being subbed out. And, the mentality of it's just the benefit to a coaching staff to have someone that is just chomping at the bit, ready when they come in. And that's what you got from Mathurin. He made the most of his minutes. I mean, 12 minutes, 20 points. I mean, that's, 10 of 11 from the foul line, just tells you the aggressive nature that he had in there. I thought defensively he was incredibly disruptive. I've said kind of going forward, when you look at the potential upside of this Pacers team, a huge part of it is Mathurin. And I think you see that he's got kind of this fight in him, this dog in him, that is very difficult to teach. And, you have to contain it at times. And I'm sure that it's caused, Rick some headaches here and there. But when you do it right, you're going to have moments from a guy like this, like you had in game 4.
Let me tell you something that happened last night, Austin, and you give me your perspective on this. I think it was late in the second quarter. I mentioned it earlier. Aaron Nesmith gets subbed out. And as he's walking off, you can tell he's frustrated that he's being subbed out. Not in a bad way, kind of in a joking way to Carlisle. He kind of gave him that look like, come on, man, like I want to stay in. Yeah. 2 possessions later, Nesmith jumps up off the bench, runs almost next to Carlisle during a dead ball, and is screaming at Ben Shepherd. Ben Shepherd runs over, and Nesmith very adamantly points out to something that Shepherd had not done in a set that he needed to correct. And Shepherd nods, goes back, does that correction, gets an open shot, and scores. Now, does that speak more to the maturity of Aaron Nesmith or Ben Shepherd?
So much of being successful is being coachable. And, you have to be open to people telling you things that you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And it is so huge. Late in my career, I played for the San Antonio Spurs, and I went into a film session, and Pop is just going off on Duncan. And Duncan's arguably one of the 10 best players of all time, and he was receptive to it. And that is such a huge part, in my opinion, of being successful in so many things, basketball, life. So I would put that on Shepherd. But an environment has been created in which players feel comfortable receiving that, which makes veteran players or people that see things more comfortable saying it without feelings get hurt. And I think championship teams, the ego gets out of the way a little bit, and teams that struggle, especially early on, that don't make the playoffs, young teams, that ego gets in the way and they don't want to hear it. They feel like their ego has been bruised. They've been called out. And that's, I think that is a beautiful thing to see in a team when you have that.
Is it common in the NBA? I mean, is it more common than we think, or is last night, is that an example of what makes this team unique?
I would say it's more on the unique side. I think, again, it depends in, a lot of ways, the personality of the team. I think that the management for the Pacers has done a good job of, picking star players. I mean, the interview, I know you were at the game, so I'm sure you didn't see it, but the interview that Siakam gave after the game was about as perfectly answered a question in terms of, who has the shine and gets the opportunities and all of those things. And, you don't get that response from an individual player coming from an environment that is very selfish. You hear that and it speaks to Siakam, but it also tells you more that it's a bigger part of the culture of this team in particular. I think that is rare.
When you were a player and you were in the NBA Finals and you had, obviously a huge NBA Finals, but do you get caught up in, do players get caught up in the moment? Do they get caught up in nervous for the moment?
I would say I was some level of nervous every game that I played in my entire career until I got in the game. And then I was never nervous. You're just focused whatever job it is that you have, if it's blocking someone out, if it's running whatever play that's setting a screen, whatever it might be. And I always felt like nervousness came from lack of preparation. And if you are prepared, yes, you're going to have those butterflies type things, but once you get into the game, that should subside and you focus on the preparation that led you to that place. And again, I think that's something that you see more with, really well coached. And I think the Knicks are a very well coached team. I think they're a very disciplined team. So I can't say that they're succumbing to that either, but that's in part why I think you get the best basketball kind of late in the playoffs, because you have the teams, that have found a way to become accustomed to that live under those situations.
Okay, last night at the game, Austin Crosher, our guest, last night at the game, and there probably were others, but off the top of my head, okay, Jelly Roll was there, Ben Stiller was there, Triple H was there, Spike Lee was there, obviously, 50 Cent was there, Mellencamp was there, the guy that played Bob Dylan, what's his name, Eddie? You seem to enjoy
Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah, thank you. He was there. So, Austin, I'd like to know, of those, which one do you consider to be the biggest star? Which one would you have been like, whoa?
Oh, gosh. I mean, just as a kid growing up in the infancy of MTV, Mellencamp was probably the biggest impact. Chalamet, he's too young for me. He would probably have been the biggest name to my kids. Spike Lee was always cool, a staple going to the Knicks game. I don't know. I don't know if any of those. I wasn't a big WWEF guy, so.
Ben Stiller's pretty big, right?
Who was that?
Ben Stiller?
Yeah. I mean, Ben Stiller, everything. Probably go with him.
Okay, so here's my question. I mean, you grew up in Southern California, right? We've talked about this before. I mean, everywhere you go, you run it. Like, you went to prom with Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, so, like, it's hard to impress you, right?
Did not.
Same high school. Wait, were you guys the same class, by the way?
No, she was a year or two older.
Okay, well, were you aware of her? Did you see her in the hallways?
Yes.
Okay. Was she popular?
Yes.
Yeah, I would assume. Okay, so with that, I would like to know, when you were a player in the NBA, tell me the one person that, like, you were in a game and you looked over and saw them on the sidelines and were like, whoa. And we're like.
So I've got a good story for you. So, and this will answer yours. This is a little bit slightly off topic, but this is a good one. So we were in the NBA Finals, Game 1 at it was then Staples Center. And next to, kind of the exit off the court into the locker room is like the Lakers front court club type thing where all the celebrities go. So we're standing in our huddle, like kind of stretching, waiting for everyone to come out of the locker room so we could go out and warm up. And Dustin Hoffman is standing by the front court club, and he starts walking towards our huddle. And I'm like, what is he doing? Like, what is Rain Man doing? He's coming over to our huddle.
Right.
What's going on here? And he comes up to me and introduces himself. And he is a parent at the high school that I went to. So his kids were currently there, not the same ages by any means. And so I'm kind of talking to him about names and people, and now all the guys are coming out of the locker room, and we're kind of getting into the huddle, and Mark Jackson kind of says something, and I'm kind of saying bye, and Dustin Hoffman's still talking to me, and Mark Jackson goes, "Hey, Rain Man, get out of here. We got a game to play."
Judge Wapner's on, right? 4:30. And now Hoffman was cool with this or not cool with this?
He kind of had a dumbstruck look, like, I'm the celebrity here. What are you're telling me to leave type of thing? But Mark didn't care. It was hilarious. So
Okay.
funny. But it's one of those things that it's like the stories of the NBA, the stories of the road. If you don't write them down, you forget. And then all of a sudden that jogged my memory a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, I'll bring that up if it ever. And then you asked the question. You teed me up perfectly.
That's beautiful, right? Okay. Gary Coleman, he went to your high school, right? Did you ever meet Gary Coleman?
He was older. No, so I did not meet him.
Did they never have? Did they never have like reunions or alumni appreciation week or anything where these people came back?
Yeah, but I was playing and living in Indiana, so I didn't go to a lot of those.
Okay. Kate Hudson, did you ever meet Kate Hudson?
Yeah. Her son and my daughter were in the same grade, so she actually hosted the pre-prom a couple of years ago.
Okay, so your kids go to pre-prom with Kate Hudson's house, right?
That was correct.
Yeah, we got to drive.
She's a very nice person.
I got to drive Chris Ferguson's dad's BMW to Chateau Normandy at 82nd and D, and your kids are going to Kate Hudson's house. It's pretty comparable, right? Okay, so going back to the Pacers-Knicks, obviously here, Game 5 coming up. Pacers up 3-1. Austin, I think for Indiana, the pace has been the difference here, and New York is on the ropes. Can the home court of Madison Square Garden, can that be enough to lift New York here to be able to keep up with this pace? Or does Indiana, is it that important that Halliburton keep running it just to take advantage of the fumes that New York appears to be on?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, of course, this is a very good Knicks team. There's a lot of talent. They play with a lot of heart. Brunson is just a fantastic star in this league. They're at home. The idea that you're going to go on the road again, right? You did it against Cleveland. You won 3 games on the road. The idea that you're going to do that in New York at the Garden again is hard to fathom, right? I mean, but that said, the Pacers are just a better team, and even in Game 1 when they were down 14 relatively late in that game, there was never a moment where I thought that the Knicks were better. And when teams are struggling, right, you always kind of say to yourself, all right, let's go to our core. What is it that we do well every single night? And for the Knicks, is they get out and run. That is their comfort place. That is what they do well. But what happens when the thing that you do well, your opponent does better? You don't have a safe place. Like, there's nothing that the Knicks can really do or hang their hat on that they are better than Indiana at. So I feel really good. Obviously, you're up 3-1, but I think that the Knicks will put up a fight. But I just think that this Pacers team smells blood in the water, and this Game 5 is most likely going to go the way that Game 5 did against Cleveland. Would I be shocked if the Knicks won? Of course not. Again, they're a good team. They're at home. They're going to have that. I think that there is a sense of pride, not wanting to end your season at home, losing those 3 games in a row. And, I expect to see the best version of the Knicks. I just don't think it's enough.
Lastly, Austin, and I may have asked you this before, Austin Crosher, our guest, last night at the game, they had, Rick Smits was there, both Davises were there, Travis Best was there, Derek McKee was there, Jermaine O'Neal was there, Lance Stevenson was there, Darren Collison, George Hill, a lot of former players. And I understand in this point why those guys are going to be invited back. They go up on the screen, etc. But one of the things to me that is always, it makes me feel good because I'm from Indianapolis, and I know in your case your wife is from the area, but a lot of players do choose to stick around Indianapolis, or they refer to the Pacers as we, even if they've gone on to play for other franchises and their journey has taken them elsewhere. It seems to be that Indianapolis is the place that a lot of players most connect with after their career is complete. Why do you think that is?
God, great question. Because I agree with you. Obviously for me, I had a 12-year career, and 9 of them were there. So there was certainly that tie, but there is something different about the organization. And again, maybe I wasn't in the other ones long enough, but there's a real family kind of feeling. I think that, the organization does a great job of just hiring good people, and that's, people that are kind of around the team. There's so much in terms of community outreach. I think that there's been obviously a high level of success with all of the players that you mentioned during that time. And they do things, quite honestly, they do things the right way. And they're very welcoming to having players come back. We get a gift box, full of Pacers gear at the beginning of every season, and those are just small little details that the organization is committed to that I think means a lot to former players. I ran into some former players a couple weeks ago, and one of the things they said is, the biggest thing that you miss when you're done playing is kind of the camaraderie, the community of it. And so for the Pacers to kind of reach out to former players, I think is, certainly on my part, and I would estimate on the part of others, is very appreciated.
So if they go to the finals or if they come back for a Game 6, will you be at any of them?
We are heading back on, on our annual thing. The schools here go a little bit later, so my youngest has a couple more weeks of school, but we would be there potentially for Game 3 and on of the finals, and keeping my fingers crossed that I could join those guys and former players that have been at all these games. It's definitely looks. You get nostalgic, for me anyway, seeing the former players there and being so supportive, and hopefully I'll get that chance to do the same thing.
Last day of school, your kid's going over to Jack Black's house for a party or anything like that? Another classmate, right? He went to your school too, didn't he?
Yeah, he's a little older too. Oh, jeez.
All right, well, listen, just for what it's worth, I know this much. Derek McKee, Jermaine O'Neal, Danny Granger, who was here, and George Hill. Those 5 at minimum. They actually did listen to the Indy 500. So there you go. They they were honest about it.
I watched the whole thing. That's got to count for something.
That does count. And Alex Pillow just posted a video that he's in New York on the Winners Tour, and he went into the NBA store and bought a Pacers jersey and dropped a Yes Sirs with it. So there's a tie-in. So it is cool, right? So
that's pretty cool. So my first time going to the Indy 500, well, it wasn't my first, but the first time I went with my wife, we got tickets in the new pagoda, and we go in and we sit up there, and my wife, who's from Indianapolis and was, she was in the Miss Indianapolis parade part of the whole thing, and we're sitting in the pagoda, and she looks at me and she goes, "This is not the Indianapolis 500 that I went to my entire life." So I don't know if I've done it as a true fan, but I've had the kind of bougie experience of sitting in the pagoda a couple times.
You need to snake pit it, bud. Go to the snake pit, and then it's for real, right? And I got news for you. There ain't a person in that snake pit that listened to the race either. So you got that in common with them. They didn't see it either, so you're different there. But all right, Austin, we appreciate it as always. Look forward to seeing you if you come back for the finals.
Sounds good. Thanks. I appreciate it, Jake.
All right, Austin Kroster joining us on the Rhinegeist Brewery guest line. Always a fun conversation. The race itself, yes, like sitting in the pagoda probably is different than like growing up in Indy and going to, just there's so many different aspects of the race that makes it great. That's the best thing about it. But interesting stuff there in terms of, in a 3-1 deficit, I am curious the pressure's on which team more, because yes, it's on New York because they don't want to be eliminated, but to an extent, and the Pacers, I guess, in a Game 5, maybe the pressure's not there as much because you're coming back for Game 6. And then that factors in as well, like with Cleveland. I think New York has an advantage over Cleveland that they are psychologically stronger than are the Cavs. I think the Cavs are more emotionally vulnerable. Speaking of the game tomorrow night, we have a show announcement that I'll give you next. Tomorrow it will be game number 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals. So a little Eastern Conference Final viewing party taking place tomorrow night at Britain Tavern up in Fishers. I'll be there from 7 until 9, probably well past 9, but I'll be getting there at about 7 o'clock with action getting underway at 8, and this all brought to you by Michelob Ultra Zero. So I would love for you to come out, enjoy a Michelob Ultra Zero, watch the game, and we will watch to see who advances, and hopefully it'll be the team from right here that advances into the NBA Finals for game number 5, Eastern Conference Finals viewing party tomorrow night, Britain Tavern in Fishers, brought to you by Mick Ultra Zero. You will hear me mention that plenty today and tomorrow, but I would love to see you there. That is now an official event taking place. So I'll be there tomorrow for it.
Will Uncle Jake's taxi be available?
Yes. And the beauty of it is, though, if you are enjoying a couple of the Mick Ultra Zeros, unless you didn't bring your own car there, you are still perfectly okay to drive home. Because just 29 calories, 0% alcohol by volume, and so therefore, bada boom, bada bing, good to go. But yes, if someone would be needing a ride, Uncle Jake's Taxi, always available for that. By the way, I think I mentioned that for Uncle Jake's Taxi, I took Emily Longnecker went with me to the race along with her 2 cousins.
Your wife?
Yep. As a matter of fact, I sent you a photo, Eddie. We were out, Shannon and I were out the other day, and we ran into Emily, and so all 3 of us got together. And matter of fact, and then Emily and her 2 cousins came with Shannon and I to the parade. So I was like leading this polygamous lifestyle, right?
I was about to say, was that problematic at all for you? I mean,
No.
You had Lady 1 and Lady 2 together.
They're like BFF. For those that don't know the joke here, about a year ago, I did a podcast, and a couple of nice guys that do a podcast invited me to go on it, and it's a video cast. So I went on it, and I show up, and the guy says, now, just so you know, in the background, there'll be a slide kind of running all the time of different photos that I pulled from you, off the internet and social media and stuff, of stuff you're involved with. And I said, oh, okay. And the guy said, I've got several pictures, including some of you and your wife. And I didn't make the correction. Well, I mean, it's girlfriend, not wife, but we have been together now for, I think, 19 years. So it's, it's kind of a moot point to correct that.
In the eyes of the government, you 2 are married.
Well, we don't, not same roof, though. That's the difference, right? Now, the Charlie, who was one of the guys that won tickets to the race on the show.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get here in time on that Friday, and I had extra tickets to give away. So I called Charlie and said, hey, I have a pair of tickets if you'd like them. He showed up. Shannon and I were out on Friday evening, and he showed up to pick up the tickets and ended up super nice guy, just a good dude. And sat down. I said, hey, well, sit down and let's have a beer or whatever and hang out. And we just sat there for about an hour shooting the bull about stuff. And he later posted on social media about how he enjoyed it, and he said that he met Jake and his wife. And again, I'm like, well, technically I'm not going to make the correction. But when I did this podcast, the guy said, I have several pictures of your wife. And I said, okay, great. And we're doing the podcast, and I look up, and he had pictures of me with Emily Longnecker of Channel 13, who is a dear friend, but not my wife, clearly, nor significant other. And I said, oh, well, and he said, well, I just Googled Jake Query wife, and that's what came up, the picture of Emily. But at any rate, I did Uncle Jake's Taxi for Emily and her 2 cousins to go into the race, and I think I mentioned yesterday, when we left downtown at 8, we were scheduled to be inside the Oval. It said between 8:21 and 8:28 a.m. And we sat on 16th Street for like an hour. I mean, you can't complain. There's 300. But then, Eddie, I think we mentioned yesterday, did we not? It was a bus got stuck in the tunnel.
Yeah, an Indigo bus.
That seems problematic.
I know.
Did nobody measure this? Like, wouldn't it be smart? Now, I realize maybe they thought that with a full slate of people on it, it would lower the bus down and it would be low enough. I don't know. But wouldn't it behoove somebody to do a little research on that ahead of time?
Yeah, I wonder if it was a first-time driver.
Good question.
A rookie driver didn't go through orientation.
Do they have the big sign that says, like, clearance 13.8 or whatever? And then
no idea.
They didn't factor in the height of the bus? Was it one of the double slinky buses that has the little squingy thing in the middle, the little squeeze thing in the middle? You know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about. I don't think so. It was an Indigo bus. That's all I know.
I know, but the Indigo buses have that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that would have been. Can you imagine being that guy? How do you get out of that? Do you have to
back up?
Take air out of the tires? Would that be it?
Go reverse? I don't know.
But if you're stuck, you're stuck. If you're too high, too low, whatever, you know what I mean? So we'll see. At any rate, Pacers last night, sensational. We've been talking about it all day today, and I know John will be doing the same coming up. As for the Fever, Eddie Garrison is the pre- and post-game host of the Fever. Their schedule would be what, Eddie?
Play tonight, Jake. They're at 7:15 pregame show is when I'll have it. The tip-off shortly after that at 7:32. John Nolan, Bria Goss on the call. Indiana Fever without Caitlin Clark. It's the first time that we will utter those words this season. It sounds like Sydney Colson, based off what Stephanie White said yesterday, will get the first crack at starting at the point guard position, along with Kelsey Mitchell, and then I'm going to assume it'll be either Lexi Hull or Sophie Cunningham, Natasha Howard, and Aaliyah Boston rounding out the starting five. But, Jake, fun little nugget for you. Today's game / tonight's game for the Fever, they're playing the Washington Mystics, not in Washington.
But not here.
Not in D.C. either.
Okay, let me guess. May I guess where this game's taking place?
Mm-hmm.
So they're taking on the 2-3 Washington Mystics.
Yes.
Now, when you say not in Washington, so typically they play, is it Verizon Arena? Is that the name of the arena that's in the district?
Sure. I'm not sure.
What is their typical home arena? Let me ask you that. What is their typical home arena?
I'll look it up.
Should I know the reason?
Care First Arena.
What is it?
Care First Arena.
Okay, but that's in the district, right?
It is in the district, yes.
So they are not playing there. Now, should I know the reason why they're not playing there? Is there like something where I'm a moron that I don't know this? Fun fact, don't tell me where it is, but.
So they're not playing in Washington of the demand of ticket sales to see Caitlin Clark.
Gotcha, okay.
And
so can I guess where they're playing?
The Wizards Arena was not available tonight for whatever the reason.
Okay.
So Capital One Arena was not on the table.
So I'm going to. So wait, but they still are playing in a bigger arena.
Yes.
Let me, if I may, if you lived next door, typically to the Wizards Arena. So if you lived in the district and you were going to this game, would you get there within a 1-hour drive?
Not at that time of day. If there was no traffic, maybe.
Is it an arena that is famous elsewhere? Like, you know what I mean? Is there another team that is a prominent tenant of said arena?
Not that I know of.
Okay, I'm gonna say that they are playing in Landover, Maryland.
Ooh, no.
It's in Virginia or Maryland, correct?
Maryland.
In Maryland, okay. Baltimore.
Yes.
Really?
Mm-hmm. CFG Arena, or CFG Bank Arena in Baltimore, Maryland is where they're playing tonight.
And you're right, that's about an hour away typically, right? Who normally is utilizing that facility? Is there like a minor league hockey team? Is
I don't
it just
think
concerts?
so. I don't think so. That they've had WWE there, the concerts. Yeah.
I like Baltimore a great deal.
It's a entertainment venue is what they call it.
There are two cities. This is weird. But I'm curious if anybody else has ever experienced this.
Seats over 14,000.
Okay. There are two cities in my life that I've gone to, and from the time that I got like off the airplane, I was like, I've been here before. And people would give me directions to something, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's right on the other side of that, right? Like, it was very strange, and I felt very at home. It's the only two cities where when I was there, I never felt in any way, shape, or form like, yeah, I'm going home tomorrow.
Seattle?
That is one.
Okay,
and
let's go.
The other's Baltimore.
Really?
When IndyCar did their race in Baltimore, like, I don't know why, but just as I remember sitting up on a scissor lift in the middle of where that race circuit was in the Inner Harbor and realizing that I was, that we were flying home after the race or whatever, and thinking to myself, but yet I could stay here for another month and it does not feel like I'd be homesick because I feel like I've lived here before. And I don't believe in that stuff, but it was weird. I mean, it was weird.
You think you could have lived there in a different life? I don't know if you're into that.
That's
type
what I
of
mean.
Stuff.
Like, I don't believe in that necessarily, but like it was like, man, it was weird. And in Seattle in particular, when I went to Seattle, I remember asking somebody directions to somewhere, and as they were explaining to me, I like cut them off, and I'm like, yeah, it's right on the other side of Queen Anne, right? And then I'm like, wait a minute, I just got here yesterday. How in the world do I know that? Very odd.
I will say that we were there one one time, so April of last year, we went there for the first time. And after like the first day, it was like, okay, I feel like I know where everything's at.
Yeah. Well, maybe you've been there too, right?
I don't know.
Do you think we were roommates in a past life?
I don't know.
Is that what it was?
And then we went there last April, as in like a month ago, over almost 2 months ago now. And we went back there. We didn't once have to use our phone.
Yeah, that's
to get
impressive.
Around. And like we went from downtown to the Market District and back downtown, and yeah,
it's a super cool place.
Yeah,
very cool. John's up next. We will hand it off to him and put a tie on all of it here on this Wednesday edition, Query & Company. You know what I always say? I was like 51 and a half years old before I realized that that's the white-winged dove.
Same with realizing that it's Carl Anthony.
That is,
Towns.
I'm telling you, that one.
And his name's not Carl Anthony Towns?
I can't be alone in that one, right?
No, I've seen some tweets about that recently too, so you're not the only one.
And I looked it up. His father's name is just Carl Towns.
No, his father's name's the same. Because I looked it up as well.
But his father's name is not Carl Anthony, right? It's Carl Towns. There's no Anthony on his father's name, right?
I thought that's what I read yesterday.
Let me look it up here. Either way, Pacers last night, huge win. Now 1 win away from the NBA Finals, presumably against Oklahoma City. But last one is the toughest one to get, no question about that. John is, as we heard, at Carroll Stadium for the Indy 11 today. I think the weather is going to clear up, right? It was kind of an ugly day, but I think tonight's supposed to be okay.
Was that one of the best playoff performances you've seen in a long time, Jake? In a Pacers uniform last night from Tyrese?
From Halliburton, no question. That was, and the thing about Halliburton afterwards, and I thought it was, I'm going to read this again because I thought it was really, really, really well written and stated. Okay? Really well written and stated. I'm reading this from Dan Devine, okay? Who's an NBA writer for Yahoo Sports. But this says a lot, I think, about this Pacers team. He says, in the course of an 11-plus minute podium session with reporters, an interview that spanned nearly 2,000 words, the primary topic of which was playing the game of his life to get his team within one win of a chance to play for an NBA championship, Halliburton used the word we 28 times, the word our 5 times, the phrase as a group 6 times, and the phrase play the right way 5 times. He said, it's about winning twice. I just want to impact winning once. And how can I impact winning once? Bringing us to 4 discrete instances of emphasizing how much he wants to win. He gave a 52-second, 189-word answer in praise of Benedict Mathurin, who bounced back from a rough start to the series by exploding for 20 points in 13 minutes off the bench, helping Indiana expand its lead with his physical drives up to the basket and the free throws they generated. He almost said that it was more exciting to see Triple H in Gainbridge Fieldhouse than it was to see his dad back in the building, but he stopped short. Chalk up another possession successfully concluded without an unforced error. That's a brilliant observation and really good writing by Dan Devine. Tyrese Halliburton's dad was there. He was in the suite, took a lot of photos, was the big star until his son took to the floor. And then Tyrese Halliburton last night was the star of the night, no question. And the other thing to me that is very curious, and I'm very curious to see what happens moving forward, and that is, and yes, going into the series, I think it was by design. I think Indiana was aware of this possibility of going to Karl Anthony Towns and trying to move him around as much as possible. And Anthony Towns yesterday, by the end of the game, looked completely spent. And it's hard to think that they can get – he's a wonderful talent. I mean, he is a unicorn, and he is a load, and he is difficult to contend with. But it's hard to think or see that Karl Anthony Towns is going to have the kind of effectiveness that he had in Game 3 in 3 more games. If this goes 7 games – which it would have to go for the Knicks to win it. If it goes 7 games, it is very difficult to see Towns having the mobility and fluidity that allowed him to dominate like he did a game ago. I just, nothing against him, but he looks like he is on like a leg and a half.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned of going to like Game 7 or whatever. Pacers, as we've documented, Jake, ever since the start of the postseason, they have not lost back-to-back games since St. Patrick's Day. They last night, by the way, was the first time that the New York Knicks, or it was the last time, last night could have been the first time they lost consecutive home games without a road game in between. They didn't do that. They haven't lost back-to-back home games since the calendar turned 2025. But to go back to the point of not losing consecutive games in general, what would have to go wrong for the Pacers in order for that to happen? Because you're talking about going on the road, losing at Madison Square Garden, and then coming back home and losing. Like, would it take somebody going down? Would it take just an epic performance by Jalen Brunson or Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, etc.?
Anunoby's the curveball there, right? Anunoby, when he's hitting shots and he's spreading things out, is he can be a difference maker for them. But no, I think what it would take would be would be just a flat performance like you saw in Game 3 of so much buildup, so much excitement, and then almost like New York, if they're hanging around, it just takes the wind out of it where you're like, oh, man, this isn't really happening, is it? And then it just becomes too much to overcome.
I just find it super hard to believe. We were talking about this during one of the breaks earlier in the show. I just find it hard to believe that they're going to lose not only one straight, not two straight, but three straight.
It's very hard to believe that, yes.
Just with the way they're playing
It's very
right
hard
now.
to think. It's very hard to think that.
Because it's wild to think, even though they're up 3-1, I don't think they've played their best game yet. Like, I don't think they've put a complete game together. As great as they were last night, I still haven't seen a complete four-quarter game.
That's fair. The best that they have played would be the last 2 minutes in overtime of Game 1, and they were pretty consistent last night. But, yes, it wasn't like, you know what I mean? But they were pretty consistent, at least over the course of last night. Halliburton, though, Halliburton just had no drop-off at all in that game from the get-go. He was aggressive, and that is their key. When he's aggressive and he makes the decision, when Halliburton gets the ball and you're going down floor, and he either goes long, extensive, like half-court entry pass to start a break, he doesn't go lateral with the ball. He's going straight forward with it. And they're getting out behind the defense of New York who can't catch up. And then you're not only are you getting a first look at a transition basket, but Indiana's getting back down court fast enough where they're playing for the first 10 seconds of the set, basically 5-on-4. And that gives them advantage. And Halliburton was remarkable and incredibly perceptive in his just the way that he sees the floor and could space it out in doing it. And then also the ability to make the immediate decision of whether or not he needs to push that or back it up and then get himself in a position where he could do that dance around, either pull up for a three, and in some points a very deep three, or penetrate to the basket. Thank you, by the way, to George Hill on short notice today, joining the program. Dustin Dopirak as well, and Austin Crozier. Big one lined up tomorrow, right, Eddie?
We'll have Tony East for sure working on some other stuff, so we'll probably preview that huge game for the Pacers. Of course, we'll touch on your watch party that you got going on, Jake, tomorrow.
That is the huge Eastern Conference Finals watch party at Britain Tavern tomorrow, 7 o'clock. John's up next. He's at Carroll Stadium. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow.